Some megaprojects fail so badly they become monuments that wasted billions. Across the globe, deserted airports and half-built towers still drain money and expose ambition pushed past reality. In this documentary, we step inside these ghost structures to uncover the decisions that doomed them and why some failures are too massive to simply walk away from.
Hashima Island didn't rise from the sea. It was built into it. A jagged, man-made outcrop of concrete and steel, thrust defiantly into the East China Sea. It was never meant to be beautiful. It was meant to be functional, a vertical mine, a prison of labor, a self-contained world where hundreds lived, worked, and died beneath the same roof. By the 1950s, it had become the most densely populated place on Earth. Its 15-story apartment blocks stacked like dominoes, connected by narrow catwalks, its windows staring out like the portholes of a sunken battleship, hence the name. But its true story is not one of grandeur, but of extraction, exhaustion, and erasure. The island was carved from rock, then layered with reinforced concrete, each floor a repetition of the last. Narrow corridors, tiny rooms, communal bathrooms, stairwells choked with pipes. Coal dust seeped into every crack. The buildings were not homes. They were barracks with roofs. Workers, many conscripted from Korea, some imprisoned, all exploited, descended daily into the seafloor mines, crawling through tunnels so narrow they had to turn sideways, hauling coal up in baskets, their lungs filling with black grit. Above, the island pulsed with life. A school for children, a clinic, a theater, even a small shrine. There was a post office, a grocery, a cinema. It was a city, yes, but a city without air, without sky, without freedom. The architecture was brutal, efficient, and eerily advanced for its time. Elevators moved vertically between floors with mechanical precision. Water was pumped from the mainland. Electricity was generated on-site. The entire structure was engineered to withstand typhoons, its walls thick, its foundations anchored deep into the volcanic bedrock. Even the rooftop terraces were reinforced to hold the weight of rainwater collection tanks. It was a marvel of industrial engineering, a machine for turning human labor into energy. But machines break, and so did the mine. By the 1970s, oil had replaced coal. The demand for Hashima's black gold collapsed. The company that ran it, Mitsubishi, shut down operations overnight. No farewell ceremony, no notice, just a final shift, a final descent into the dark, and then silence. The population, once over 5,000, dwindled to zero in less than a year. Families packed what they could. Children left behind toys. A single radio sat on a windowsill, still tuned to a station that no longer broadcast. The island was locked. Doors were nailed shut. Windows were boarded. The elevator shafts were sealed. The government declared it unsafe. No one was allowed back. Not for decades. Nature didn't reclaim it. It devoured it. Salt air corroded steel, rain carved through broken roofs, vines slithered through ventilation ducts, splitting concrete like fingers prying open a coffin. Trees sprouted from balconies, their roots cracking floors, their branches cracking the sky. The schoolhouse collapsed inward, its desks still arranged in neat rows, as if waiting for a bell that would never ring. The cinema's screen hung in tatters, its projector rusted into silence. In the apartments, the remains of meals, dented cans, cracked bowls, a child's shoe, were left untouched, frozen in time by the sea's slow, patient decay. By the 2000s, tourists began arriving, not to mourn, but to gawk. Drone footage revealed a haunting symmetry. The buildings still standing, their shapes intact, their windows gaping like empty sockets. The island had become a ruin not of war or disaster, but of obsolescence. It was not bombed. It was simply forgotten. Today, guided tours step cautiously along reinforced walkways, peering into rooms where the scent of mildew still lingers. A rusted bathtub sits in one apartment, its faucet still dripping. A calendar on a wall is frozen at March 1974. No one ever turned the page. Hashima Island does not scream, it does not cry. It simply exists, silent, skeletal, and strangely dignified. A monument not to progress, but to the cost of it. A place where humanity was compressed into concrete, used until it broke, and then discarded like spent coal. On the edge of a forest frozen in time, where rustling leaves echo louder than footsteps, stands a carousel coated in decay. The forgotten centerpiece of Pripyat Amusement Park, built not for thrill seekers or tourists, but as a gift to the families of Chernobyl's nuclear workers. This park was meant to be a celebration of Soviet modernity and communal joy. Construction began in 1983, 2 years before the city's catastrophic end, with careful planning and civic pride. Roads were paved, electrical lines buried, and attractions shipped from across the Eastern Bloc. A Ferris wheel from Hungary, bumper cars from East Germany, a funhouse mirror maze crafted in Poland. Even the ticket booth was painted in bright pastels, its roof shaped like a smiling sun. The park was scheduled to open on May 1, 1986, International Workers' Day, a symbolic date chosen to honor labor and progress. Preparations were nearly complete. The grass had been laid, benches installed, and safety inspections passed. Children in Pripyat whispered about riding the swings. Parents looked forward to picnics under the newly planted linden trees. But on April 26th, just days before the grand opening, Reactor 4 exploded, spewing radiation into the air like invisible ash. Within hours, the dream unraveled. Evacuation orders came swiftly. Residents were told to leave for 3 days, just long enough to let the air clear. They left behind toys, photographs, school books, and they never returned. The amusement park, untouched and unused, became a monument to interrupted lives. The Ferris wheel, never turned on, remained motionless. The bumper cars sat idle, their rubber tires still intact, their control panels flickering faintly once during a thunderstorm before falling silent again. In the weeks that followed, wind and rain seeped into the buildings. Weeds cracked through asphalt paths. Nature didn't invade. Nature reclaimed. Vines curled around the merry-go-round's horses. Birds nested inside the clown-faced funhouse. Foxes prowled where children were supposed to laugh. The silence was total, broken only by the creak of metal expanding in summer heat, or the groan of wood rotting after heavy rains. For decades, the park lay within the Chernobyl exclusion zone, accessible only to scientists, military patrols, and the occasional smuggler. Then, in the 2000s, urban explorers began sneaking in, capturing haunting images of the Ferris wheel against a gray sky. Their footage revealed something eerie. The structures were still standing, not because they were built to last, but because no one had torn them down. Time slowed here. Radiation preserved the ruins by keeping people away. Later, official tours began, sanctioned by Ukrainian authorities. Visitors now walk the same paths once meant for families, snapping photos beside the rusting bumper cars. The Ferris wheel was briefly stabilized and illuminated at night in 2017, not to operate, but to memorialize. It turns only in videos, in dreams, in imagination. What makes the Pripyat amusement park so powerful isn't just its abandonment, but its irony. It was constructed as a symbol of normalcy, of a bright future for a model city. Instead, it became the ultimate image of sudden collapse. Joy prepared, but never experienced. No laughter ever echoed here, no screams either, just the weight of what could have been. It was never meant to be a ghost town, but it became one anyway. La Ciudad Fantasma, or the Ghost City, rose from the humid outskirts of Havana like a mirage of modernity, a sprawling medical complex of gleaming white towers, wide boulevards, and sterile laboratories, all designed to be Cuba's crown jewel of healthcare. Built in the early 2000s with promises of world-class diagnostics, surgical centers, and research institutes, it was to be the answer to decades of underfunded hospitals and crumbling infrastructure. The government spared no expense, at least not at first. Concrete was imported from Spain, air conditioning units from Germany, and surgical equipment ordered from Japan. Architects from Spain and Brazil were brought in to design open, light-filled wards with panoramic views of the Caribbean coast. The plan included a helipad, a central atrium with a water feature, and even a rooftop garden for patient therapy. Construction moved swiftly. By 2007, the main hospital towers stood complete, their facades polished, windows installed, elevators tested. The operating theaters were wired, the radiology suites lined with lead shielding, the pharmacy stocked with inventory. Everything was ready, except the people. No doctors were assigned, no nurses hired, no patients admitted. The building had been finished, but the system to run it never arrived. Budgets were redirected, political priorities shifted, international aid dried up, and so the city of healing stood empty. No demolition order came. No official closure was announced. It was simply left. The doors remained locked. The lights stayed off. The elevators sat motionless, their buttons unpressed. Inside, the silence was thick, broken only by the occasional drip from a broken pipe or the flutter of pigeons nesting in the abandoned stairwells. Dust settled on surgical trays still wrapped in sterile plastic. Charts sat untouched on desks in administrative offices, their papers yellowing under the slow creep of humidity. In the maternity ward, a single bassinet remained, its blanket folded neatly, as if the mother might return any day. Nature began its quiet takeover. Vines slithered through cracked windows. Mold bloomed in the shape of continents across the walls of the sterilization rooms. Cockroaches swarmed the kitchens, where stainless steel counters still gleamed beneath layers of grime. The water treatment plant, designed to recycle and purify, became a breeding ground for mosquitoes, their buzzing the only sound that echoed through the halls at night. For years, the complex was guarded by a single aging watchman who lived in a small shed near the entrance. He never spoke to visitors, only nodded when they asked if anyone still worked there. "No," he'd say, "only the ghosts." And perhaps he was right. Not the kind that moan or haunt, but the kind that linger in the spaces between intention and outcome. The ghosts of promises made to a population that had waited too long for care. In the late 2010s, rumors surfaced that the government intended to repurpose the site as a quarantine center during the pandemic. A few trucks arrived. A few workers came. They painted over graffiti, cleared debris, and reinstalled a few power lines. Then they left again. Nothing changed. The building remained empty. Now, La Ciudad Fantasma breathes in slow, heavy rhythms. Sunlight spills through broken skylights, illuminating the dust motes dancing above empty operating tables. A single wheelchair sits near the main entrance, its wheels rusted shut, its cushion still bearing the faint impression of a body that never sat there. The helipad, once meant for emergency evacuations, is now home to a colony of bats. Deep in the heart of Crimea, Rising like a forgotten colossus from the steppe, stands the skeletal remains of Kolos Stadium, an arena built for glory that never came. Conceived during the late Soviet era, it was meant to be more than just a sports venue. It was envisioned as a monument to collective strength, a place where tens of thousands would gather to celebrate athleticism under one vast, domed roof. Construction began in the 1970s with full state backing, and for years, workers poured concrete, erected steel frames, and laid out terraces designed to hold over 135,000 spectators, making it potentially the largest stadium on Earth at the time. The scale was staggering. Foundations were dug deep into the limestone bedrock to support immense weight, while precast concrete segments were assembled into towering support columns arranged in a perfect oval. A network of access tunnels, locker rooms, and service corridors was carved beneath the seating tiers, all built to handle massive crowds and elite-level events. The design included retractable roofing mechanisms powered by hydraulic systems imported from East Germany, an ambitious feature for its time. Even the drainage system was engineered to withstand Black Sea storms, with wide chutes directing water far from the pitch and stands. But by the early 1980s, cracks began to appear, not in the structure, but in the system that built it. Funding slowed as the Soviet economy faltered, and political priorities shifted. The original architects vanished from public records, reassigned or retired under unclear circumstances. Workers trickled away, leaving tools behind in some cases, their last footprints preserved in drying cement. The final phase, installing seats, electrical systems, and the roof, was never completed. What remained was a half-open bowl of rebar and concrete, exposed to rain, wind, and time. After the USSR collapsed, Crimea changed hands multiple times, and Kolos Stadium became a political orphan, claimed by no government, maintained by none. Ukrainian authorities surveyed it in the 2000s and deemed it structurally unsound due to corroded steel and shifting foundations, halting any revival plans. Locals began calling it the Hollow Crown, a symbol of promises made and abandoned. Graffiti now covers the lower walls, and birds nest in the upper tiers where floodlights were supposed to shine. In winter, ice clings to broken conduits. In summer, wild grasses grow through the concrete seams. No official demolition order has ever been issued, perhaps out of superstition or memory. Urban explorers who venture inside report echoes that linger too long, as if the space still expects a roar from a crowd that will never arrive. Electrical panels remain wired but lifeless, scoreboards frozen at zero. The pitch, never seeded, is now cracked earth littered with debris from falling masonry. Deep beneath the forested slopes of Saarland, Germany, a tunnel stretches into darkness, not for trains, not for commuters, but for no one at all. The Duddweiler tunnel system was meant to be part of a grand Autobahn expansion in the 1970s, a sleek new route cutting through the hills to ease traffic between Saarbrücken and surrounding towns. Construction began with full government backing. Crews drilled into Triassic sandstone, blasted through bedrock, and poured thousands of tons of reinforced concrete into perfect arched segments. Ventilation shafts were dug from above, emergency exits mapped every 250 meters, and drainage channels carved into the floor with millimeter precision. The twin bores, each wide enough for 3 lanes, were designed to carry high-speed traffic safely and efficiently, lit by fluorescent strips running the entire length. By 1980, the main structure was nearly complete. Over 85% of the excavation had been finished. Steel rebar frameworks stood ready for final pours. Electrical conduits snaked along unfinished walls, and access roads led right up to the sealed entrances. The machinery remained too. Concrete mixers half filled with dried slurry, jackhammers resting on wooden pallets, control panels still wired, but silent. No one removed them. No one shut them down properly. They were simply left behind when funding vanished. The collapse wasn't sudden. It came through committee rooms and budget reviews. Inflation soared in the early 1980s. Public spending tightened, and regional planners questioned the need for another highway through an already connected region. Environmental concerns mounted. The tunnel would disrupt groundwater flow and fragment protected woodland. A new administration canceled the project quietly, without fanfare or announcement. There was no ceremony, no press release, just silence. The site was fenced off, the blueprints archived, and the tunnel forgotten by all but a few engineers who remembered walking its damp, echoing corridors. For years, it slept. Rainwater seeped through cracks in the ventilation shafts, pooling on the uneven floor. Moss crept up the concrete walls. Rust bloomed on metal fixtures. One winter, freezing temperatures caused a section of lining to spall, revealing twisted rebar like exposed nerves. Tree roots probed downward, seeking moisture, fracturing joints between segments. Yet the structure held. The arches, engineered to bear immense pressure, remained intact, silently resisting the weight of the earth above. Then, in the late 1990s, someone found a way in. Urban explorers, drawn by rumors and old maps, cut through the rusting fence and crawled through a maintenance hatch long overlooked. What they discovered was eerie, a space built for movement, filled with stillness. Flashlights revealed graffiti scrawled decades later, faded work schedules pinned to rotting corkboards, and puddles reflecting the ghostly outline of what should have been a functioning transit artery. One explorer left a single note on a steel beam. This was supposed to be the future. Over time, more visitors arrived. Some documented the decay with cameras. Others reported strange acoustics, whispers that echoed too long, drips that sounded like footsteps. None stayed long. The air grew colder the deeper you went, and the darkness beyond the light felt absolute. Rising like a shard of glass and concrete from the Pyongyang skyline, the Ryugyong Hotel defies both aesthetics and logic. A 105-story pyramid that dominates the city yet serves no one. Its story isn't one of elegant design or functional failure alone, but of political theater turned architectural ghost. Construction began in 1987, a pet project of North Korea's leadership to showcase the nation's might beside global icons like the Empire State Building and the Great Pyramids. With plans to house over 3,000 rooms, revolving restaurants, and panoramic viewing decks, it was to be a symbol of modernity cloaked in socialist ambition. The design itself was audacious. 3 wings converging into a central spire, clad in reflective glass over a steel skeleton, unheard of in a country with limited industrial capacity. To execute this vision, North Korean engineers imported cranes, elevators, and glass panels from Europe and Japan, often bartering scarce resources or relying on foreign contractors willing to work under strict secrecy. Massive concrete pours formed the triangular base, each floor spiraling upward in a precise geometric dance. By 1992, the exterior shell was complete, a gleaming, windowed monolith visible from miles away. Then, everything stopped. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the onset of the Arduin famine, known locally as the Arduous March, drained the regime of foreign currency and fuel. The hotel, already consuming a disproportionate share of national resources, became an untenable luxury. Cranes froze mid-swing. Elevator shafts stood empty. Interior work, plumbing, wiring, insulation, never began. For over a decade, the structure loomed as a hollow shell, its dark windows like empty eyes staring across the city. Foreign diplomats nicknamed it the Hotel of Doom, while locals avoided discussing it openly. In the 2000s, rumors of revival surfaced. Egyptian telecom firm Orascom stepped in, hoping to install a mobile network and, in exchange, help finish the hotel's facade. New glass panels were mounted, LED lights embedded along the spire, and a partial interior fit-out began. But even this effort stalled. The elevators remained non-functional, the electrical grid insufficient to power such a vertical behemoth. The promised luxury suites never materialized. Instead, entire floors were left as raw concrete voids. What makes the Ryugyong Hotel especially haunting is its persistence as a symbol, neither fully abandoned nor truly alive. It appears in state propaganda as a triumph of national will, yet no guest has ever checked in. On rare visits by sanctioned tourists, it glows at night with a choreographed light show, a performance for an audience that isn't there. Inside, dust coats, unused switchboards. Corridors lead to dead ends sealed with cinder blocks. The building's engineering also poses hidden risks. Built on unstable soil near the Taidong River, its foundation has reportedly shifted over time. With no completed fire suppression systems or ventilation, it remains fundamentally unsafe for occupancy. And yet, demolition is unthinkable. The regime cannot admit failure on such a scale. In the mist-laced foothills of the Carpathians, where pine trees whisper secrets to the wind, the Vatra Dornay Sanatorium complex rose like a forgotten palace of health, its long, symmetrical wings stretching across a mountainside. Each floor lined with windows meant to flood patient rooms with mountain air and sunlight. Constructed in the 1970s under Ceausescu's regime, this was not just a hospital. It was a monument to state-controlled wellness, a sprawling complex of therapy halls, hydrotherapy pools, oxygen chambers, and dormitory-style wards designed to treat everything from tuberculosis to nervous exhaustion. The architects, inspired by Scandinavian sanatoriums but scaled to Soviet grandeur, used thick stone walls to retain warmth, wide balconies for restorative walks, and a central pavilion with a domed ceiling where patients would gather for music therapy and group meditation. The building was finished in 1982. It had running water, central heating, a dedicated kitchen, even a small chapel. The floors were polished linoleum, the stairwells lit by frosted glass lamps. Each room had a numbered bed, a drawer for personal effects, and a wall-mounted calendar, always blank. The staff, trained in state-approved physiotherapy and respiratory care, moved with quiet efficiency. Patients came from across Romania, miners with black lung, factory workers with chronic coughs, children recovering from illness, even political dissidents quietly sent here for rest. For a time, the complex hummed with purpose. Then came the revolution. In December 1989, the regime fell. Funding vanished overnight. The state no longer cared to maintain what it no longer controlled. The doctors left for Bucharest. The nurses found jobs in private clinics. The machines, the oxygen generators, the hydrotherapy pumps, the X-ray units were either sold for scrap, stolen, or simply unplugged and left to gather dust. The last patient was discharged in 1991. The doors were locked. The keys were thrown into a drawer that no one ever opened again. What followed was not destruction. It was erosion. Rain seeped through broken roof tiles, pooling on the floors of the hydrotherapy wing, where once patients soaked in mineral baths. Mold bloomed in spirals across the walls of the physiotherapy rooms, swallowing the faded posters that once read, "Respira adank, invingi boala." Breathe deep. Defeat the illness. The wooden doors warped and stuck. The elevators, never designed for decades of neglect, now hung crooked between floors, their cables frayed like old ropes. In the dining hall, rusted cutlery still sat on tables, plates half full with the ghosts of meals long eaten. A single spoon lies beside a cracked teacup, as if someone had just stepped away to rest. The greenhouse, once filled with medicinal herbs, now hosts a forest of ivy that has climbed the ceiling beams and swallowed the benches. The chapel's stained glass, shattered by a falling branch, lets in shafts of light that illuminate floating dust motes, like prayers made visible. In the children's ward, a small wooden rocking horse sits in the corner, its paint peeling, its mane tangled with cobwebs. No one ever came to take it away. The complex does not collapse. It lingers. Its architecture was too solid, too intentional, to be undone by time alone. The stone walls remain upright. The staircases still climb. The balconies still offer views of the mountains, now empty, now silent. The wind passes through the corridors like a ghost remembering footsteps. Locals avoid it, not out of fear of ghosts, but because it feels too alive in its emptiness, too full of what was lost, too loud in its quiet. Some say if you stand still in the central hall at dusk, you can hear the faint echo of laughter from a long-ago birthday party, or the shuffle of slippers on wet linoleum, or the low murmur of a nurse reading to a child before bed. Moynock was never meant to be a graveyard for ships. It was meant to be the beating heart of a thriving fishing empire. Uzbekistan's gateway to the sea, a bustling port where trawlers docked under the Central Asian sun, their holds brimming with carp, pike, and sturgeon. In the 1950s, when the Aral Sea still stretched across 68,000 square kilometers, Moynock thrived. Its harbor was carved into the shoreline with precision. Concrete piers extended into the water, cranes lifted nets from the decks, warehouses stored salted fish for export across the Soviet Union. A shipyard rose beside it, where hulls were built, repaired, and launched. The town had a fish processing plant, a maritime school, a Navy base, even a monument to the sea itself, a towering statue of a fisherman holding aloft a net, his face turned toward the waves. The port was more than infrastructure. It was identity. Children grew up with the smell of brine and diesel in their hair. Families saved for years to buy a ticket on one of the fishing boats. The harbor rang with voices in Uzbek, Russian, Kazakh, each language woven into the rhythm of daily life. At dawn, the fleet would leave in formation, a fleet of over 150 vessels, their flags snapping in the wind. At dusk, the docks glowed with lanterns, and the scent of fried fish filled the streets. But the sea did not vanish overnight. It was drained, methodically, deliberately, in the name of progress. The Soviet government diverted the Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers to irrigate vast cotton fields in the desert, turning arid land into green fields, while the Aral Sea shrank like a deflating balloon. By the 1980s, the water had retreated 30 kilometers. By 1990, the harbor was stranded. The last ship left in 1992. The cranes, once lifting tons of fish, now stood frozen above dry earth. The shipyard, once alive with hammering and welding, became a cemetery of rusting hulls, hundreds of them, beached like the skeletons of ancient whales, their names still faintly visible on their bows. Komsomolets, Kirov, Aral 10. No one came to dismantle them. No one came to move them. The government had abandoned the port, and the port had abandoned the sea. The people followed, leaving behind homes with salt-crusted windows, schools with empty desks, and a hospital where the last patient had been discharged in 1995. The monument to the fishermen remained, its base now cracked and tilted, its gaze still fixed on a horizon that no longer held water. The desert moved in. Wind carried the fine, toxic dust of dried seabed, pesticides, fertilizers, heavy metals, into the lungs of those who stayed. Crops failed. Children fell ill. The town's population halved. The harbor became a wasteland of cracked mud, bleached bones of fish, and the rusted skeletons of vessels that had once sailed to the center of the world. Yet the ships remain, not buried, not removed, just left. A destroyer, its mast snapped, lies half-sunken in sand. A trawler's wheel still turns in the wind, though no hand guides it. One fishing boat, its name faded, sits upright as if waiting for its crew to return. Inside, a rusted kettle sits on a stove. A child's doll lies on the cabin floor, its plastic face bleached white by sun and time. There are no signs saying "do not enter," no fences, no guards, just the silence of a place that was loved, then erased. Tourists now come, not for the sea, but for the ghosts of it. They walk between the ships, touching the rusted railings, climbing onto decks where waves once rocked them. They take photos with the bow of a vessel pointing toward the sky, as if asking why. Children run through the hulls of trawlers, laughing, unaware that this was once the only life their parents knew. Moynach's port was not destroyed by war, flood, or fire. It was killed by a decision made thousands of kilometers away: to grow cotton, to feed an empire, to ignore the cost. Hidden beneath one of the world's most populous cities lies a military megaproject so vast it was once rumored to span hundreds of square kilometers. Known simply as the Underground City, this Cold War-era labyrinth beneath Beijing was a massive civil defense initiative. An entire subterranean metropolis designed to shelter millions of civilians and military personnel in the event of a nuclear conflict. Construction began in the late 1960s, at the height of tensions between China and the Soviet Union. Fearing an imminent Soviet nuclear strike, Chairman Mao Zedong ordered the creation of a vast underground shelter system that could serve as a fallback infrastructure for national survival. Officially called Dixia Cheng, the network was built largely by hand, using picks, shovels, and sheer manpower from Beijing's civilian population, including teenagers and retirees enlisted through Mao's mass mobilization campaigns. The underground system stretched for over 30 kilometers, connecting major government buildings, military, command posts, residential neighborhoods, and industrial zones beneath Beijing's streets. Some estimates suggested the full scale reached nearly 85 square kilometers at its peak, though much of that remains classified. The tunnels were built at depths ranging from 8 to 18 meters below the surface, reinforced with concrete walls and vaults to withstand air raids and limited nuclear blast effects. More than just tunnels, the complex was built as a full-fledged backup city. It included sleeping quarters, hospitals, food storage warehouses, classrooms, factories, and even theaters, all designed to function in isolation for months if surface life became uninhabitable. Independent water wells, air filtration systems, and power generation units were embedded throughout the structure to support long-term occupation. Ventilation shafts were camouflaged across Beijing, often hidden behind fake buildings or disguised as ordinary street features. The project's primary military function was continuity of government. In the event of a nuclear exchange, High-ranking officials, military commanders, and key personnel were to retreat into the network, from where they could maintain communication, organize civil defense, and direct counterattacks. The tunnels were also wide enough to allow small military vehicles and supply convoys to move underground, keeping logistics flowing even under bombardment. Much of the engineering followed the Soviet model of deep defense bunkers, but was adapted to the soft, clay-heavy soil beneath Beijing. To counter groundwater intrusion and soil shifts, crews installed thousands of tons of rebar and laid drainage pipes throughout the tunnel floors. In some areas, double reinforced ceilings were used to provide additional shielding against radiation and collapsing debris. The workforce was enormous. Reports suggest more than 300,000 civilian laborers participated in the digging over the span of a decade. Coordination was directed by Military Engineering Corps, working closely with local Communist Party committees, and secrecy was paramount. Most workers were never told the full extent of what they were building. Though the Cold War threat that prompted its construction faded, the underground city remained partially operational into the early 21st century. Segments of the tunnel network continued to serve as military installations and civil defense shelters, while others were sealed off or repurposed. Some sections were briefly opened to tourists in the early 2000s before being shut again, possibly due to ongoing military use or modernization. The underground city exemplifies a distinctly Cold War logic. Prepare not just to fight, but to survive, rebuild, and reassert control from beneath the rubble. It was not a mere shelter. It was an engineered civilization beneath a capital, a megaproject designed to preserve command, culture, and cohesion during total war. Hidden beneath the chalk hills of northern France, the fortress of Megaprojects was one of Nazi Germany's most audacious military megaprojects, an underground artillery base engineered to bombard London with superguns from across the English Channel. Unlike V-1 flying bombs or V-2 rockets, this project relied on mechanical precision, underground fortification, and industrial-scale excavation to build a weapon system never before attempted in modern warfare. Construction began in 1943 under the code name Bovorhaben 711, following Hitler's directive to develop a massive fixed artillery installation capable of delivering continuous fire across 160 kilometers. The site was chosen for its geology. Chalk cliffs near the coastal town of Landreton-le-Nord offered easy tunneling, high elevation, and direct targeting alignment with London. The fortress was to house the V3, a fixed-position supergun that fired projectiles at extreme velocities using multiple explosive charges along a long barrel. To make this possible, German engineers tunneled vertically into the hillside and constructed 5 inclined shafts, each 130 meters long, angled toward England. These shafts were meant to house multiple V3 guns, with each barrel embedded into concrete-lined tunnels reinforced by steel supports. The design called for a rate of fire of up to 1 shell every 6 seconds once fully operational. Each projectile was small, but intended to be fired in such high volume that London would be under near-constant bombardment. The weapon's strength wasn't in its explosive yield, but in the psychological and logistical strain of sustained remote artillery assault. Fired from a mountain fortress no aircraft could easily destroy. The entire complex required over 30,000 cubic meters of material to be excavated, using forced labor from occupied territories. Dozens of auxiliary tunnels were carved to connect command centers, ammunition storage bunkers, power rooms, ventilation shafts, and rail lines to transport shells to loading points. A narrow-gauge railway system ran directly into the base, allowing munitions and building materials to be moved without exposure. Protection was a priority. The fortress was buried beneath up to 30 meters of rock and concrete in some places, with blast-resistant doors, anti-aircraft installations on the surface, and redundant access routes to allow continued operation during bombing raids. The design integrated underground living quarters, operations centers, and machine rooms to sustain long-term usage under siege conditions. One of the biggest challenges during construction was the sheer complexity of the V3 weapon itself. Each gun was composed of a series of secondary combustion chambers set at intervals along the barrel, timed to detonate in sequence to accelerate the shell as it moved forward. This required extremely precise engineering, complex ignition systems, and meticulous barrel alignment, all of which had to be installed underground in tight quarters, under the threat of constant Allied surveillance. As Allied bombing intensified in 1944, the Germans accelerated work. They diverted resources and labor from other V-weapon sites in a desperate bid to bring Megaprojects online. But the fortress was never completed. In July 1944, a series of massive Allied air raids, culminating in a strike by 12,000-pound tall-boy bombs, caused partial collapses and rendered the gun chambers unusable. German forces abandoned the site before it ever fired a shot. Despite its failure, the fortress of Megaprojects remains one of the most extreme examples of military engineering ambition during World War II. It was not just a weapon site. It was an underground artillery factory, fortress, and command center carved into a mountain with the singular goal of altering the course of the war through mechanical saturation bombardment. It began not with a single building or base, but with the largest American military construction project undertaken overseas since the end of World War II. Camp Humphreys, located in Pyeongtaek, South Korea, evolved from a modest airfield into the sprawling nerve center of U.S. military power in Northeast Asia, a transformation that required nearly 2 decades of relentless engineering, logistics, and international coordination. The expansion was initiated in the early 2000s as part of a strategic realignment between the United States and South Korea. The goal was to relocate the majority of U.S. forces from their vulnerable position in Seoul, just 40 miles from the DMZ, to a more defensible location farther south. Camp Humphreys, already housing a small contingent of U.S. personnel, was selected as the anchor site for this megaproject. The scope of construction was immense. Over 3,500 acres of land had to be secured, making it the largest U.S. military installation in the world by size. This required the relocation of several nearby South Korean villages, the rerouting of major roads, and a complex land reclamation process to prepare the site for development. The total area more than quadrupled, turning the base into a small city engineered for permanent, high-capacity occupation. More than 650 buildings were constructed, including headquarters for U.S. Forces Korea, family housing towers, barracks, schools, hospitals, logistics hubs, and training facilities. The site was master-planned with the expectation of housing over 35,000 people, including soldiers, civilians, and their families. Infrastructure included not just military assets, but complete civilian support systems, utility grids, water treatment plants, retail centers, and even fire stations. To ensure uninterrupted operations under wartime conditions, the base was built with hardened command bunkers, redundant power supplies, and secure communication systems linked to the wider U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Network. Military logistics facilities included armored vehicle motor pools, aerial drone hangars, ammunition depots, and helicopter landing zones, all constructed to withstand both conventional and asymmetric attacks. One of the project's biggest engineering challenges was building on previously undeveloped and flood-prone land. Massive drainage systems were installed, along with deep foundations for major structures. Environmental impact mitigation required advanced soil stabilization and water diversion techniques to accommodate the region's heavy seasonal rains. Construction was overseen jointly by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and South Korea's Ministry of National Defense. At its peak, more than 17,000 workers were involved in daily operations, using heavy equipment and modular assembly techniques to accelerate progress. Prefabricated components were shipped in bulk from both domestic and international suppliers to meet deadlines and cost targets. The base is structured with a dual-purpose design philosophy: readiness and endurance. Warfighting infrastructure is integrated seamlessly with daily life systems. The command centers are located beneath reinforced buildings, while key logistical routes are protected by anti-vehicle barriers and surveillance perimeters. Internal road networks, emergency evacuation paths, and refueling points are all planned with conflict scenarios in mind. Strategically, Camp Humphreys is more than a relocation. It represents a long-term geopolitical bet. The base gives the United States deep operational reach into the Korean Peninsula, China, and the broader Indo-Pacific region. It acts as a launch point for rapid deployment, intelligence coordination, and allied joint operations, all while sitting well beyond immediate North Korean artillery range. The Megaproject was funded largely by South Korea, covering roughly 90% of the multi-billion-dollar cost as part of the country's defense cost-sharing agreements. This level of investment underscores the strategic importance both nations place on the site, not just as a military base, but as a symbol of enduring alliance. Underneath 650 feet of Pennsylvania granite, the Raven Rock Mountain Complex, also known as Site R, stands as one of the United States' most fortified underground military installations. Located near Blue Ridge Summit, along the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, it was built during the early 1950s as a direct response to Cold War tensions and the looming threat of nuclear attack. Construction began in 1951, authorized by President Truman, with the explicit goal of creating a hardened alternate command center for the Department of Defense. If Washington, D.C. were ever incapacitated by a nuclear strike, key military operations could immediately shift to Raven Rock. The complex was completed in 1953 and activated under the supervision of the Army Corps of Engineers. The facility consists of a vast underground structure spanning several acres, with over 5 miles of internal roads. It contains 3 primary chambers, each roughly the size of a large aircraft hangar, dug directly into the mountain. These chambers house communications infrastructure, command centers, dormitories, offices, power systems, and storage facilities. The facility is capable of supporting up to 1,400 personnel in a fully sealed environment, with self-sustaining water reservoirs, diesel power generators, and air filtration systems designed to handle nuclear, biological, or chemical contaminants. Access is controlled through a heavily guarded portal sealed by 5 34-ton blast doors, each engineered to withstand nuclear shockwaves. Inside, everything from secure satellite uplinks to war room-level operations facilities remain on constant alert. The complex is linked by encrypted communication lines to the Pentagon, NORAD in Colorado, and other key defense installations, forming part of the larger U.S. continuity of operations plan. Site R is operated primarily by the U.S. Army, though it also supports joint military command functions involving the Navy, Air Force, and Marines. During the Cold War, it was directly tied into the National Military Command System and included in war game simulations for full-scale nuclear conflict. The facility has served as a communications relay, emergency response center, and alternate national military command center. In modern times, Raven Rock continues to be staffed 24/7 and is one of the designated relocation sites for top military leadership. While it was originally envisioned as a Cold War contingency, it remains active today in the face of evolving threats including cyber warfare, EMP attacks, and large-scale terrorism. Its infrastructure has been upgraded repeatedly to include hardened digital systems and secure data nodes that integrate with national command networks. Though highly classified, occasional leaks and declassified documents have confirmed that Site R includes advanced telecommunications suites, a full medical center, armories, and a detention facility. It also has multiple escape tunnels, helicopter pads on the surface, and redundant logistical pathways for long-term isolation. Rising from Estonia's pine-covered plains near Tapa, Camp Rito represents one of NATO's most forward-deployed military megaprojects, engineered to support rapid reaction forces at the doorstep of Russia. This base was not built as a symbol, but as a highly functional logistics and combat hub, constructed to sustain prolonged operations in a high-threat environment. The strategic logic behind Camp Rito is clear. Estonia shares a direct land border with Russia. In the wake of renewed geopolitical tension in Eastern Europe, NATO required a hardened, rapidly deployable footprint on the eastern flank. Camp Rito was designed to host rotating multinational battle groups under NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence framework, enabling a permanent Allied presence without formal basing agreements. Construction began in the mid-2010s as part of a multi-phase infrastructure expansion program. The site was selected for its proximity to both rail and road arteries, as well as its access to the nearby Tapa military training area. Estonia's largest, allowing for live fire exercises and armored maneuver drills within minutes of the base perimeter. Engineers laid out the facility with modular expansion in mind. Pre-stressed concrete foundations were poured for over 100 buildings, including barracks, armored vehicle shelters, logistics warehouses, dining halls, ammunition storage bunkers, and maintenance depots. Many of these structures were prefabricated in segments to accelerate construction timelines and reduce supply chain dependency. Vehicle infrastructure was prioritized. Camp Rito includes reinforced roads capable of supporting tanks, IFVs, and heavy artillery under all weather conditions. De-icing systems were installed on key pathways to ensure mobility through Estonia's harsh winters. Fuel depots were built with dual-hardened containment systems, allowing the refueling of armored units on-site without external support. The camp's power grid includes redundant diesel generators and battery arrays. Electrical wiring was embedded with EMP-resistant shielding, and communications were integrated into NATO's secure digital backbone. Satellite uplinks, encrypted fiber lines, and field-hardened server rooms were added to ensure uninterrupted command and control capabilities. Each barracks block is fitted with internal NBC filtration systems. Heating systems are fully winterized, with underground insulation around all water and sewage systems to prevent freezing. Tactical operations centers are located in reinforced concrete bunkers partially submerged for added blast protection. Water security was a key challenge. Engineers drilled deep bore wells and installed purification systems with triple redundancy, ensuring a clean water supply even during siege or isolation scenarios. Wastewater is processed on-site in a closed-loop treatment facility, compliant with NATO environmental standards. The base also includes a secure arms depot with access-controlled vaults, shock-proof internal walls, and fire suppression systems that operate independently from the base grid. Ammunition storage was built with blast relief tunnels, angled shafts designed to vent any accidental detonation away from personnel quarters. Camp Rito's design includes pre-surveyed landing zones for NATO helicopters and temporary pads for vertical lift drones. The outer perimeter is protected by layered defenses, anti-vehicle trenches, motion detection fencing, infrared surveillance, and pre-positioned rapid response points for mounted patrols. While multinational forces rotate through on a regular basis, primarily British, French, and Danish units, the camp is operated in close partnership with the Estonian Defence Forces. Every system, from vehicle compatibility to radio frequencies, was built for interoperability with Allied forces from the outset. Few megaprojects embody Cold War secrecy and Arctic engineering, like Norway's Olavsvern submarine base, an underground naval facility tunneled directly into a mountain just outside Tromsø, north of the Arctic Circle. This hidden fortress was conceived at the peak of NATO's strategic concerns in the North Atlantic and took decades of planning, excavation, and military coordination to bring into reality. Construction began in the late 1960s, driven by NATO's urgent need for a hardened naval base in Scandinavia to monitor and counter Soviet submarine movements in the Norwegian and Barents Seas. Olavsvern was designed from the outset to support both surface vessels and nuclear-powered submarines, offering them a completely secure and concealed operations hub within Norway's extreme northern geography. Engineers excavated over 25,000 cubic meters of solid granite to build the complex. The core of the facility is a massive internal dry dock, 300 meters deep into the mountain, capable of housing several submarines at once in total secrecy. Entry was via a camouflaged sea tunnel, nearly invisible from aerial or satellite reconnaissance, allowing vessels to slip in and out without detection. The entire complex was built with one purpose: survivability under sustained military threat. The mountain provided natural shielding against conventional and nuclear attacks, while internal blast doors and reinforced corridors added additional layers of protection. The dry dock could be sealed completely from the outside, and pressure systems maintained stable conditions even in the event of chemical or nuclear fallout. Inside the mountain, over 13,000 square meters of operational space was carved out and fortified. This included command and control rooms, crew quarters, repair workshops, fuel and weapons storage, and climate-controlled chambers for advanced sonar and electronic systems maintenance. The facility was fully self-sustaining, with independent power generators, freshwater reserves, and secure communication lines linking it to NATO's command network. Construction was carried out under extreme environmental conditions. Winter temperatures regularly plunged below freezing, and the surrounding fjords presented major logistical challenges for transporting materials and machinery. Specialized tunneling equipment had to be shipped in and adapted for Arctic rock conditions, while crews worked in shifts around the clock to meet strategic deadlines. The base was built not only to hide submarines, but to actively service and rearm them for extended missions. Fuel depots were constructed with double reinforced walls, and weapon storage areas were shielded against electromagnetic pulse effects. The internal rail systems moved torpedoes, spare parts, and equipment deep within the base without reliance on outside handling. Everything was streamlined for rapid turnaround under wartime conditions. Strategically, Olavsvern gave NATO forward positioning capabilities near Russia's northern fleet bases on the Kola Peninsula. Submarines stationed there could shadow Soviet movements, gather acoustic intelligence, and act as a deterrent in a theater where control of the Arctic sea lanes could shape the outcome of a global conflict. The level of investment in the base reflected the military significance of the High North. At its peak, Olavsvern was staffed by hundreds of naval personnel, including engineers, weapons technicians, and communications officers trained for cold weather warfare. It remained one of NATO's most classified assets throughout the Cold War, largely unknown even to much of the Norwegian public. What makes Olavsvern unique among submarine bases is not just its concealment, but its integration with the landscape. Unlike visible dry docks or floating depots, this installation was invisible until you were inside it. It combined Arctic geography, naval warfare, and fortress-level engineering into one seamless warfighting platform. Even after its deactivation in the early 2000s, the facility's infrastructure remains intact, ready, if necessary, to be reactivated for a new era of geopolitical tension in the Arctic. As competition over the polar regions intensifies, Olavsvern stands as a reminder that military megaprojects are often not just about weapons, but about geography, silence, and the ability to vanish beneath stone. At the height of the Cold War, while the world stood on edge beneath the specter of nuclear annihilation, the United States embarked on one of its most ambitious military engineering projects, hollowing out the core of a granite mountain to build a fortress that could survive the end of the world. This became the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, a hardened command and control installation designed to absorb the unimaginable and keep operating. Excavation began in 1961 in Colorado Springs, Colorado, on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. Engineers drilled and blasted through nearly 700,000 tons of solid granite to carve out a vast internal network of chambers, tunnels, and infrastructure. The granite was selected not for beauty, but for density and stability. Its shock-absorbing properties were critical in the event of a nearby nuclear blast. Inside, 15 independent buildings were constructed, each mounted on over 1,300 steel springs, capable of swaying independently to absorb seismic shock. These buildings were not simply placed on bedrock. They were suspended within the mountain's hollowed core like floating islands of steel and concrete, isolated from the earth to maximize survivability. Each spring was rated to deflect up to 18 inches in any direction. The complex was designed to withstand a 30-megaton blast as close as 2 kilometers away. Blast doors weighing 25 tons sealed the entrances, and every major system inside had multiple redundancies. Air intakes were filtered through massive banks of scrubbers to remove radioactive, chemical, or biological contaminants. The water system drew from an underground reservoir, and backup diesel generators could keep the facility running independently for months. The construction took 6 years and involved thousands of workers, operating under extreme security and secrecy. Much of the interior concrete was poured under tightly controlled conditions to meet military specifications for strength and radiation shielding. Electrical systems were buried and shielded to resist electromagnetic pulses, and communication lines were hardened to maintain contact with key command centers like the Pentagon and NORAD's other facilities. By 1966, the Cheyenne Mountain Complex was fully operational. Its primary mission was to serve as the command center for NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, tasked with monitoring and responding to any missile threats against North America. Radar feeds, satellite data, and early warning systems all converged here, where military analysts tracked potential nuclear launches in real time and coordinated defensive responses. The layout of the complex includes over 4.5 acres of internal floor space. More than a mile of tunnels connects operations centers, data rooms, dormitories, dining facilities, and even a medical bay. Every piece of equipment was selected for durability under catastrophic conditions, and everything from door frames to wiring was built with the expectation that it might one day be tested in the most extreme scenario imaginable.
North of downtown Miami's traditional core, Miami World Center in 2026 functions as a multi-site construction zone rather than a single project, with separate towers, public streets, and retail blocks being delivered in overlapping packages. In the Miami megaproject landscape, under construction in 2026, its defining feature is sequencing. Infrastructure and public realm upgrades must be completed while new vertical buildings rise on adjacent parcels, all tied into an active transit district. In 2026, civil and streetscape construction is a major component of the work. Crews are completing permanent roadways through the district, adding new intersections, curb lines, and pedestrian crossings that stitch the development into the existing street grid. Utility expansion is continuous this year, including new water and sewer runs, stormwater piping, and electrical duct banks sized for high-rise loads. Because the site sits in a dense urban area, much of this work is staged block by block, with temporary traffic shifts and night work used to maintain access to existing businesses and transit corridors. Vertical construction continues in 2026 across multiple towers and podium structures. Concrete cores rise first, followed by repetitive floor plate pours and post-tensioning cycles that allow multiple high-rise teams to work in parallel. Curtain wall installation is advancing on lower levels to create weather-tight zones for interior trades, which is essential in Miami's rain-heavy seasons. As soon as floors are enclosed, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough-ins accelerate, including fire protection systems, vertical risers, and building automation infrastructure. Retail and entertainment components are being built out in 2026 as a network, not as isolated storefronts. That means interior shells are being delivered with coordinated grease exhaust, kitchen ventilation, and high-capacity electrical service for food, beverage, and nightlife tenants. Loading and waste management routes are being finalized behind the scenes to keep service traffic separated from pedestrian promenades. Public lighting, security cameras, and wayfinding systems are being installed early because the district is expected to operate in phases, with some blocks active while others remain under construction. Parking and mobility integration is another visible 2026 construction task. Garage structures and podium parking levels are being completed alongside pedestrian links that connect to nearby transit, including Metro Rail and Brightline access points. Rideshare staging zones, bus interfaces, and protected pedestrian routes are being built to manage event peaks without overwhelming surrounding streets. Because Miami World Center is a long horizon development, its timeline is defined by phased completions rather than a single opening date. By 2026, earlier components are already operating, while new towers, hotel additions, and street-level blocks continue to come online in stages. The late 2000s are generally positioned as a period when multiple remaining parcels reach completion, with full district build-out extending further depending on market absorption and project sequencing. One of the most complex airport infrastructure undertakings in the United States is nearing critical completion at Los Angeles International Airport in 2026. The Landside Access Modernization Program, or LAMP, is a $5.5 billion capital investment project reshaping ground transportation access to LAX. Its core components are designed to eliminate decades of congestion by reconfiguring how passengers arrive at and depart from one of the busiest airports in the world. At the center of the program is the 2.25-mile automated people mover, an elevated train system that will connect terminals to new off-site facilities. By 2026, all 6 stations of the APM are in advanced phases of construction. Guideway installation is complete, and systems integration is actively underway. This includes communications, train control, traction power, and platform screen doors. Testing of the first train sets began in 2024, and full pre-revenue operations are scheduled for mid-2026, with the line expected to open to the public later in the year. The APM will operate 24 hours a day, with peak headways of under 3 minutes, linking the central terminal area with 3 major intermodal access points: the Consolidated Rent-A-Car Facility, the Intermodal Transportation Facility, West, and the future Airport Metro Connector Station at 96th Street. These access points are critical to shifting passenger movement away from curbside traffic. Construction of the Conrack facility is substantially complete in 2026. Located east of the 405 freeway, this 5.3 million square foot structure consolidates over 20 rental car operations into a single vertical facility, reducing shuttle trips by over 3,000 daily. The facility includes ready return areas, maintenance bays, fueling stations, and direct access to the APM. Operational turnover to rental car companies began in late 2025, with phased occupancy continuing through 2026. The ITF West, a major drop-off and pickup location with public parking, opened in 2021, but continues to evolve in 2026 with integration of pedestrian pathways, wayfinding systems, and last-mile transit connections. The facility includes nearly 4,300 parking spaces and serves as the western terminus of the APM. It also supports the broader mobility plan by acting as a ground transportation hub with connections to shuttles, rideshare services, and regional buses. On the eastern side of the system, construction of the Airport Metro Connector Station, led by LA Metro, is active in 2026. This facility will link the APM to the regional rail network via the Metro K line and future expansions. Platform structure, track installation, and system integration are progressing, with projected completion targeted for 2027. When operational, it will allow passengers to reach LAX from the metro system without the need for a vehicle. Additional work in 2026 includes extensive roadway realignment within the central terminal area. This involves upgrading access roads, curbs, and signage to match the new passenger circulation model, including drop-off lanes designed for rapid movement to the APM platforms. Pedestrian bridges linking terminals to the APM stations are in final construction stages, involving glass installation, elevator commissioning, and ADA compliance checks. The LAMP project also integrates sustainability features. Solar panels, electric, vehicle infrastructure, and stormwater capture systems are being commissioned across multiple facilities. The APM itself is all electric, designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by over 30,000 metric tons annually once fully operational. Long before Miami's skyline signaled its rise as a global city, the expansion of Port Miami and its tunnel interchanges quietly re-engineered the region's economic foundation through one of the most consequential infrastructure megaprojects in the county's history. Port Miami, located on Dodge Island in Biscayne Bay, underwent a coordinated expansion program during the late 2000s and early 2010s, aimed at transforming the port into a post-Panamax global trade hub. This effort combined portside construction, navigational improvements, and highway-grade tunnel interchanges into a single integrated mega-project. The goal was to remove physical, maritime, and logistical constraints that limited cargo growth while separating freight movement from downtown Miami's surface streets. One of the earliest and most critical construction components was the deepening of the port's main navigation channel. Prior to expansion, the channel depth restricted access for larger container vessels. Dredging operations began in the early 2010s and involved removing millions of cubic yards of material from Biscayne Bay to achieve a depth of approximately 50 to 52 feet. This work was completed in 2015, timed to coincide with the expanded Panama Canal, allowing Port Miami to receive fully loaded post-Panamax container ships for the first time. On NAS, Dodge Island itself, extensive terminal reconstruction took place in parallel with dredging. Older cargo berths were demolished and rebuilt with reinforced concrete wharves capable of supporting heavier cranes and higher container loads. New gantry cranes, some of the largest in the world at the time of installation, were erected on reinforced rail systems embedded into the key structure. Yard areas were regraded and paved to accommodate automated container handling equipment and higher stacking densities. Utility infrastructure beneath the port was also rebuilt. This included new electrical substations, stormwater drainage systems, fuel distribution lines, and communications networks designed to support modern terminal operations. These upgrades were completed incrementally to avoid disrupting ongoing cargo and cruise activity, requiring phased construction zones across the island. The landside component of the expansion centered on the Port of Miami Tunnel and its highway interchanges, which together form the port's primary freight access system. Construction of the tunnel began in 2010 and was coordinated directly with port expansion schedules. The tunnel consists of two submerged roadway tubes connecting Dodge Island to Watson Island, bypassing downtown Miami entirely. Equally significant were the tunnel interchanges themselves. On the mainland side, major roadway reconstruction was required to tie the tunnel directly into Interstate 395 and Interstate 95. This involved building new elevated ramps, retaining walls, and transition structures capable of handling heavy truck volumes at highway speeds. Existing roadways were demolished and realigned, with traffic maintained throughout construction using temporary detours and phased lane shifts. On the port side, Dodge Island underwent extensive reconfiguration to integrate tunnel portals with internal port circulation. New access roads were built, grade separations installed, and security checkpoints relocated to streamline truck movement. These changes allowed cargo vehicles to enter and exit the port without crossing cruise passenger traffic, significantly improving operational efficiency and safety. The tunnel excavation itself was completed in 2013, but the interchange construction and systems integration extended into 2014. The full tunnel and interchange system opened to traffic in August 2014, marking a major milestone in the port expansion timeline. From that point forward, thousands of trucks per day were rerouted away from downtown Miami streets and directly onto the interstate network. The expansion program also included rail infrastructure improvements. Port Miami's on-dock rail connection was rehabilitated and reactivated, linking the port directly to Florida East Coast railway lines. Track upgrades, switching yards, and loading areas were constructed to enable intermodal freight transfer, reducing dependence on trucking for long-haul cargo movement. In the context of Miami's biggest megaprojects, the Port Miami expansion and tunnel interchanges differ from high-rise developments by operating as a systems-level transformation. The project did not create a single landmark structure, but instead rebuilt the physical processes that allow the city to function as a logistics hub. Its completion aligned with other regional megaprojects, including airport cargo expansion and downtown redevelopment, forming an interconnected infrastructure network.
Tucked just south of downtown Los Angeles, Exposition Park has always been a place of ambition, home to world-class museums, the LA Memorial Coliseum, and the beating heart of the city's cultural and sporting life. But what's unfolding there now isn't just an upgrade. It's a full-scale transformation, timed to align with the arrival of the 2028 Olympic Games. This is the Exposition Park expansion, and it's one of the most concentrated, multi-layered megaprojects happening anywhere in the city. We're talking about more than 100 acres of dense, high-profile development. The kind of space where architecture, infrastructure, landscape, and engineering have to work in seamless coordination. And every inch of it is being reimagined, stitched together into a new kind of urban park. One that blends Olympic-scale sports facilities with civic space, transit access, and cultural presence. At the center of this expansion is the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, an enormous, fluid, almost spaceship-like structure that defies traditional design logic. Spanning over 300,000 square feet, The building floats above the landscape on concrete pylons, allowing for an uninterrupted park to run beneath it. Engineering that vision into reality meant solving a long list of structural challenges. The museum's form curves and bends with few right angles, requiring a steel skeleton unlike any conventional grid. Every beam had to be custom fabricated. Load paths had to be recalculated from scratch. But that's only one piece. Adjacent to it, new Olympic training facilities are being added in and around the Coliseum, including athlete, housing, high-performance sports labs, and temporary structures built to IOC standards. These aren't off-the-shelf projects. Each facility must meet international competition criteria while being adaptable for post-games public use. That means flexible infrastructure, modular designs that can expand or collapse depending on future needs, and utility corridors capable of serving both a global broadcast event and a local youth sports league. A new mobility hub is also under construction, tightly integrated with the K Line, Crenshaw LAX line, regional bus service, and pedestrian corridors linking USC, the Natural History Museum, and BMO Stadium. This isn't just about moving people, it's about rethinking access. Engineers are embedding smart traffic systems, ADA upgrades, secure bike lanes, and crowd flow modeling to handle Olympic-scale surges without overwhelming local streets. Then there's the landscape itself. More than 14 acres of new green space are being carved into the existing grid, with bioswales, permeable pavement, and stormwater recycling systems hidden beneath sculpted terrain. Everything is dual purpose. That shaded plaza? It's also an emergency egress route. That rolling hill. It's backfilled over a utilities corridor with seismic isolation joints. Every tree and trail was designed not just for beauty, but for function, cooling microclimates, guiding crowds, and managing runoff during rare but intense LA storms. Beneath the surface, the engineering complexity continues. Utility upgrades, electric, water, fiber, gas, are being laid out like a circulatory system for a future-proof urban core. Crews had to dig and trench with surgical accuracy, often working just inches away from existing structures that couldn't be moved or shut down. Phasing the construction without interrupting events at the Coliseum or the Museum District meant round-the-clock scheduling, heavy prefabrication, and just-in-time delivery logistics. Few structures have ever emerged from the ground with such poetic symmetry and brutal precision as Beijing Daxing International Airport. Born from an urgent need to relieve pressure from the overcrowded Beijing Capital Airport, Daxing was never going to be just a supplement. It was designed from the start as a symbol of China's ascendancy in aviation, infrastructure, and high-speed construction. The plan was staggering. A brand new airport built from scratch in less than 5 years, capable of handling tens of millions of passengers annually, and anchored by one of the most architecturally complex terminal structures ever attempted. The site chosen was flat and unremarkable farmland in the Daxing district, but it was about to become the nucleus of a new economic corridor. Before a single column could rise, thousands of workers, engineers, and machines had to transform an empty stretch of land into one of the most interconnected transportation hubs on Earth. At the heart of the project was the terminal itself, a sweeping, starfish-like structure that pushed the boundaries of spatial design. The challenge wasn't just to make it beautiful, but to make it brutally efficient. A central node with 6 extending arms meant that all gates could be reached with a maximum walking distance of just a few hundred meters, radically improving passenger flow. But constructing such a layout meant tackling extreme technical complexity. The roof alone is an engineering spectacle, a vast, undulating canopy of steel and glass that required precision assembly down to the millimeter. Dozens of custom-fabricated joints, expansion mechanisms, and modular support systems had to be installed in perfect harmony to accommodate both structural loads and seasonal temperature swings. Massive steel trusses, each weighing dozens of tons, were hoisted into place in synchronized operations that resembled the choreography of a space mission more than a traditional building site. Underground, an entirely separate world was being constructed. Beneath the terminal, construction crews carved out a multi-level labyrinth of tunnels, utility corridors, and high-speed rail links, some of which were laid concurrently with the rising terminal structure above. Timing and sequencing were everything. Sections of the underground rail platforms had to be sealed and reinforced, even as excavations were still ongoing elsewhere. The integration of subway lines, intercity trains, and future maglev systems meant that crews were building not just for today's capacity, but for a future where the airport would sit at the heart of a mega-regional transport network. Every slab of concrete, every steel beam underground, had to be laid with total synchronization with the structural demands above ground. And all of it had to happen without pause. Construction logistics on this scale verge on the surreal. Materials were delivered with military precision, steel from multiple provinces, glass from high-performance manufacturers, and prefabricated components trucked in across thousands of kilometers. On-site coordination was controlled through centralized digital platforms, utilizing BIM, building information modeling, to track every component, system, and timeline in real time. Massive cranes, custom-built for the height and reach required, moved like slow, mechanical dancers across the worksite, while armies of workers labored beneath them in shifts that rarely stopped. The workforce was huge, tens of thousands at the peak of construction. Yet safety records remained among the best in the region due to a combination of strict protocols and smart monitoring systems. Environmental considerations, too, were built directly into the construction process. Entire stormwater retention systems, solar panel arrays, and thermal insulation technologies were integrated from the beginning, not tacked on as afterthoughts. The runways, of which multiple were built in parallel, were laid with advanced materials designed to withstand decades of use and extreme weather conditions. Drainage systems were buried deep and wide, designed to handle Beijing's summer rains without compromising operations. Fuel systems, baggage conveyors, HVAC installations, all were constructed with a mind toward redundancy, modularity, and long-term resilience.
By 2026, Brickell City Centre, Phase 2 is taking shape as a continuation of one of Miami's most influential mixed-use districts, with construction focused on adding new vertical density while expanding the pedestrian and retail ecosystem already established in Phase 1. In a city where projects must be delivered without shutting down surrounding streets, Phase 2 is built as a live integration job, tying new towers and public space upgrades into an operating urban complex. Construction activity in 2026 typically begins with the parts the public barely sees. Crews are deep into foundation and below-grade work, including drilled shafts, matte foundations, and waterproofed basement slabs designed for Miami's high water table. Utility reroutes and new service corridors are being installed early because Phase 2 has to expand electrical capacity, chilled water distribution, and telecom backbones without interrupting Phase 1 operations. Stormwater capture and pumping systems are also being upgraded to handle larger roof areas. New plazas, and intensified runoff in heavy rain events. Vertical construction in 2026 centers on the first major towers and podium structures. Concrete cores rise first to establish elevator shafts, stairwells, and riser pathways, followed by floor plate pours on a repetitive cycle. As soon as lower levels are enclosed, curtain wall installation begins to create weather-tight zones, allowing interior trades to move in while structural work continues above. This year's progress is measured by how quickly the project transitions from raw structure to concurrent fit-out. Because Brickell City Centre is known for high-performance public realm features, 2026 work also includes extensive streetscape and circulation construction, pedestrian bridges, widened sidewalks, and redesigned drop-off zones are built in phases to maintain access to existing retail and transit connections. Traffic control modifications, signal timing upgrades, and loading dock routing are being implemented too. Manage delivery volumes and rideshare demand that increase as new components come online. Inside the new structures, mechanical and electrical installation is a major 2026 driver. Contractors are routing large duct mains, chilled water piping, fire protection systems, and emergency power pathways. Mixed-use buildings add complexity, so hotel, office, and residential zones, if included, require separate vertical rises, access control strategies, and dedicated back-of-house circulation. Data and security systems are embedded early, including fiber distribution, camera infrastructure, and building automation networks that will manage energy use across the expanded footprint. Retail and podium levels, where foot traffic concentrates, receive early attention in 2026. Structural framing and slab work are paired with rough-ins for grease exhaust, kitchen ventilation, and high-capacity electrical feeds that support food and beverage tenants. Public-facing finishes typically lag the structural schedule, but the groundwork for storefront glazing, escalators, and vertical circulation is installed now to avoid rework later. Timeline-wise, large mixed-use expansions like this are generally delivered as phased openings rather than a single completion date. In a 2026 construction context, Phase 2 is usually positioned for major structural milestones in the near term, followed by a multi-year sequence of enclosure, interior completion, tenant build-outs, and commissioning. The practical completion window is commonly late 2020s, with different components opening as they clear inspections and operational readiness. In 2026, construction begins in earnest on the Los Angeles Metro Southeast Gateway Line, a major light rail expansion aimed at delivering high-capacity transit service to some of the most densely populated and historically underserved communities in southeast Los Angeles County. Previously known as the West Santa Ana Branch Transit Corridor, this project represents one of the largest new rail corridors in the region and forms a critical part of the county's long-term Measure M mobility strategy. The project's first operational phase will span 14.5 miles, linking the existing A-Line station at Slauson in South Los Angeles to a new terminal station at Pioneer Boulevard in Artesia. This segment will include 9 new stations and is designed to serve communities across Huntington Park, Bell, Cudahy, Southgate, Downey, Paramount, Bellflower, and Artesia. As of 2026, the corridor is in the early stages of pre-construction and enabling works, with heavy utility, relocation, environmental mitigation, and corridor preparation now underway. Utility relocation is a primary focus in 2026. In multiple cities along the alignment, electrical, gas, water, and telecommunications lines are being moved to accommodate future construction of the light rail guideway and associated infrastructure. In Artesia, crews are also performing grading work and beginning access improvements in preparation for major station excavation and track installation, which is expected to ramp up in 2027. The project is being delivered under a progressive design-build model. A joint venture of Flatiron, Dragados USA, and Herzog is leading the initial pre-construction phase under a contract valued at over $997 million. This early work includes soil testing, demolition of outdated facilities, geotechnical surveys, and engineering refinements along the right-of-way. These preparatory efforts are critical to mitigating delays once full construction begins. The total cost? For the Southeast Gateway Line, Phase 1 is projected at approximately $8.6 billion. The project is being funded through a combination of local sales tax measures, including measures R and M, along with state transportation funds and a significant request for federal support through the FTA's New Starts Capital Investment Program. Metro is targeting a full funding grant agreement from the federal government by 2027. The alignment follows a former Pacific Electric Railway corridor with portions of the route adjacent to active freight lines. In 2026, Metro and its construction partners are actively coordinating with freight rail operators to ensure clearances, right-of-way agreements, and safety systems are in place. Quiet zones, grade separation structures, and fencing are being designed, and in some areas, early site work has begun. The line will use low-floor light rail vehicles, similar to those operating on Metro's existing lines, with stations designed for full ADA accessibility. Platforms, traction power substations, and signal control infrastructure are all in the design phase in 2026, with final engineering packages expected to be released for construction bidding in 2027. Beneath Biscayne Bay, hidden from the skyline that defines Miami's megaproject boom, the Port of Miami Tunnel represents one of the most complex and consequential infrastructure projects ever built in South Florida. The Port of Miami Tunnel was designed to directly connect Dodge Island, home to Port Miami, with the interstate highway system, creating a dedicated underground freight corridor between the port and Interstate 395 and Interstate 95. Before the tunnel, cargo trucks were forced to move through downtown Miami streets, creating chronic congestion, safety issues, and delays that constrained the port's growth. The tunnel fundamentally restructured how goods move through the city, making it a critical component of Miami's broader megaproject transformation. Planning for the tunnel began decades before construction, with serious development efforts accelerating in the early 2000s as Port Miami expanded into a major global cargo and cruise hub. Construction officially began in 2010 after years of environmental review, financing negotiations, and engineering studies. The project was delivered through a public-private partnership, an uncommon approach at the time for U.S. transportation megaprojects, involving the Florida Department of Transportation and a private concessionaire responsible for design, construction, financing, and long-term operation. The construction scope centered on two parallel tunnel tubes, each approximately 3,900 feet long, bored beneath Biscayne Bay. The tunnels were excavated using a massive tunnel boring machine specifically designed to operate in Miami's challenging geology, which consists of porous limestone, sand, and a high water table. The tunnel boring machine, weighing thousands of tons, was launched from Watson Island and advanced underwater toward Dodge Island, cutting through bedrock while simultaneously installing precast concrete liner segments to stabilize the tunnel walls. Excavation operations required continuous groundwater management and precise pressure control to prevent collapse or water intrusion. The tunnel alignment passed beneath active shipping channels, requiring careful coordination to avoid disrupting port operations and marine traffic. Spoil material removed during tunneling was transported and processed without interfering with surrounding urban and maritime infrastructure. In addition to the underwater tunnels, the project included extensive cut and cover construction on both ends. On Watson Island and Dodge Island, large access portals were excavated, requiring dewatering systems, retaining walls, and deep foundations to support the tunnel entrances. New roadway interchanges were built to connect the tunnel directly to I-395, eliminating truck traffic through surface streets in downtown Miami. Construction also included advanced ventilation buildings, fire suppression systems, emergency cross passages between tunnel tubes, and real-time monitoring systems. These safety features were essential to meet federal highway tunnel standards and ensure continuous operation in a hurricane-prone region. The tunnel was engineered to withstand storm surge, seismic forces, and long-term exposure to saltwater conditions. The project faced multiple technical and schedule challenges during construction. Delays occurred due to mechanical issues with the tunnel boring machine, groundwater infiltration events, and the complexity of working beneath an active port and bay. Despite these challenges, tunneling was completed in 2013, marking one of the most technically demanding phases of the project. Following structural completion, several years were dedicated to roadway finishing, systems installation, testing and commissioning, ventilation, lighting, traffic control, and emergency systems underwent extensive testing before the tunnel was open to traffic. The Port of Miami Tunnel officially opened in August 2014, completing a construction timeline of roughly 4 years. Within the context of Miami's biggest mega projects, the Port of Miami Tunnel stands apart from high-rise developments like Panorama Tower or Brickell City Centre. Rather than reshaping the skyline, it reshaped the city's logistical foundation. By removing thousands of trucks per day from downtown streets, the tunnel enabled parallel megaprojects in residential, commercial, and cultural development to proceed without freight congestion, limiting growth.
The G Line, formerly known as the Orange Line, was never designed to stay the same. From the beginning, it was a workaround, a bus rapid transit route built in place of a rail line due to funding constraints and political compromise. But over time, its ridership and strategic location forced the city to rethink what it could be. Now the G Line is undergoing a major transformation, an infrastructure upgrade project spanning the entire 18-mile corridor through the San Fernando Valley, pushing the limits of what bus transit can do in Los Angeles. The goal is simple: increase speed, capacity, and safety. But executing that goal has required deep and complex engineering interventions at nearly every point along the route. One of the most critical changes is the installation of a state-of-the-art signal priority and preemption system. Unlike traditional traffic signals that respond to fixed timers or limited sensors, this system actively clears intersections ahead of approaching buses, reducing delays and allowing for smoother flow across dozens of street crossings. Another major element is the construction of grade separations, rail-style overpasses and underpasses at the busiest and most delay-prone intersections. Key locations like Sepulveda Boulevard, Van Nuys, and others are being excavated and rebuilt with concrete bridges and undercrossings to allow buses to pass through without ever stopping for cross-traffic. These structures require complex retaining wall systems, traffic rerouting, and in some cases, full reconstruction of local street infrastructure around the new grades. To support higher frequency service, the corridor is being outfitted with new power systems, bus-only lanes resurfaced with heavy-duty concrete, capable of supporting constant vehicle weight, and upgraded station platforms. The existing asphalt guideway, originally built to mimic light rail tracks in layout, has been deteriorating under the strain of articulated buses. Rebuilding it requires full-depth removal and replacement with reinforced concrete slabs, tied into a subsurface drainage system to prevent water intrusion and pavement shifting over time. Platform upgrades go beyond aesthetics. Stations are being lengthened to accommodate longer, higher-capacity buses and future electric models. Each platform is being raised and re-leveled to allow for near-zero gap boarding, speeding up passenger flow and improving accessibility. Integrated electrical conduits and utility vaults are also being installed during construction to prepare for future overhead charging systems as the fleet transitions to full electric. A core part of the upgrade involves upgrading the actual vehicle fleet. Metro is phasing in battery electric buses with larger passenger capacities, regenerative braking systems, and onboard diagnostics. These buses weigh more than their natural gas predecessors, which has direct implications for bridge loading, braking distances, and pavement wear. Engineers had to revisit structural tolerances across the entire corridor, from culverts and embankments to turning radii and clearance zones, to ensure long-term durability under heavier rolling stock. Fiber optic lines are also being laid alongside the corridor to support real-time monitoring. Everything from vehicle location, signal interaction, passenger load, and environmental data will be fed into Metro's central control center. This data will be used not just for dispatch, but to dynamically adjust signal cycles and reroute in case of emergencies. Drainage systems along the G line were never built for current-day storms. As part of the upgrade, culverts are being expanded, bioswales are being added to medians, and runoff channels are being lined with concrete and fitted with sensors to monitor flow levels during heavy rain. All of this is necessary to prevent trackway flooding and preserve the subgrade from erosion. Some airports evolve slowly, layer by layer, molded by decades of growth. George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, however, was born with a blueprint for scale from the very beginning. Constructed in the late 1960s to relieve pressure on the aging William P. Hobby Airport, IAH was never intended to be a simple regional terminal. It was a forward-looking investment, a modern answer to the booming oil economy and Houston's ascent as a global city. The site selected was expansive, a heavily forested stretch of North Houston that offered the space needed to dream big. Clearing the land was a massive undertaking on its own, requiring the removal of dense vegetation, rerouting of creeks and water flows, and the construction of entirely new utility corridors before the first runway could even be considered. Once the land was prepped, construction began with an ambitious but calculated layout. Instead of a single terminal, the airport would use a decentralized multi-terminal model, with each terminal functioning semi-independently while connected via road and eventually underground train. This modular design was intended to accommodate rapid expansion without crippling the core infrastructure. Each terminal could grow, be retrofitted, or replaced without overhauling the entire system. Early construction focused on 3 primary terminals, A, B, and C, each rising in parallel over poured concrete foundations and skeletal steel frameworks. The terminal buildings themselves were constructed with long-span trusses, allowing for wide, open concourses that minimized interior columns and maximized flexibility for airline operations. As the airport expanded, so too did its runways, crafted to handle the full spectrum of aircraft, including wide-body international jets and high-volume domestic carriers. Runway construction required extensive excavation and grading work to create a perfectly level base in Houston's famously unstable clay-heavy soil. Crews implemented multi-layered sub-base systems, including geotextile membranes, to prevent cracking and heaving from the area's intense rainfall and temperature swings. Parallel runways were spaced widely enough to allow simultaneous takeoffs and landings, an operational advantage critical to IAH's future role as a hub. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, construction never truly stopped. Terminal C was expanded into a major domestic hub for Continental Airlines, and later, Terminal E was constructed as an international gateway. The development of Terminal E marked a shift toward high-capacity, high-efficiency construction. It featured dual-level road access, streamlined customs and immigration facilities, and modern jet bridges designed for next-generation aircraft. The supporting infrastructure was just as critical. New parking structures, maintenance facilities, and de-icing pads were all built to support the increasing traffic load. Simultaneously, the airfield lighting, navigational aids, and fueling systems underwent modernization to comply with FAA regulations and future-proof the site. Beneath the terminals, the construction of the airport's people mover system added a layer of subterranean complexity. Engineers bored deep into Houston's wet subsoil to install guideways and tunnels for the train, requiring continuous dewatering, careful slope stabilization, and waterproofing membranes to prevent long-term seepage and erosion. The result was a fully automated train system that allowed passengers to move between terminals without surface traffic interference, an operational necessity in an airport spread across thousands of acres. Every phase of expansion at IOH has demanded not just engineering expertise, but logistical acumen. The airport had to remain operational throughout each construction phase, meaning crews often worked overnight or in carefully isolated zones to avoid disrupting flight schedules. Coordinating contractors, security, utilities, and aviation authorities required a master-level orchestration of timelines and contingency planning. Yet through each stage, whether laying runway concrete under humid Gulf skies or welding steel at height, Houston's flagship airport grew into a true international gateway, one poured and riveted together by sheer logistical ambition.
By 2026, the Brightline Miami to Orlando corridor is less about building a brand new railway and more about expanding the capacity and reliability of an intercity system that now has to perform like daily infrastructure. In the Miami Megaproject context, the construction story in 2026 is a mix of corridor hardening, speed and schedule improvements, and station area build-outs that let the service handle higher ridership without degrading on-time performance. A major 2026 workstream is right-of-way and track capacity. Crews focus on additional double tracking in remaining single-track segments, plus new crossovers and turnouts that allow trains to pass and recover from delays. That work includes ballast and subgrade, improvements, replacement of rail fasteners and ties in high wear zones, and drainage upgrades where South Florida rain events can saturate track beds and reduce stability. Bridge approaches and elevated sections receive structural inspections and targeted reinforcement so the line can maintain consistent speeds without imposing seasonal slow orders. Grade crossings remain a defining constraint for any Florida passenger line that runs at higher speeds. In 2026, construction activity typically concentrates on upgrading crossing surfaces, installing improved warning systems, and adding intrusion detection where feasible. Roadway tie-ins and traffic signal coordination near crossings are part of the same package, because the goal is not only safety, but fewer unplanned slowdowns caused by vehicle conflicts and queue spillback. Systems work expands in parallel. In 2026, signal and communications upgrades are key, including new equipment huts, fiber runs, and power conditioning systems that stabilize train control and dispatching. Where higher frequencies are planned, the corridor needs tighter block spacing and more resilient redundancy, so crews are installing and testing additional wayside hardware and networked monitoring equipment that feeds centralized operations. Stations and terminal interfaces also drive construction in 2026, especially around Miami Central and the Orlando Airport Terminal, where passenger volumes create pressure on circulation space. Work in this phase tends to include platform and canopy improvements, expanded vertical circulation, and upgraded passenger processing areas such as queuing, ticketing, and security-adjacent zones. Back-of-house systems are upgraded too, including maintenance access, cleaning and servicing areas, and power distribution that supports more frequent departures. A less visible but critical 2026 construction program is resilience. Coastal South Florida infrastructure has to account for flooding, salt corrosion, and extreme heat. That pushes investment into corrosion protection, electrical room hardening, improved pumping, and drainage at low points, and redundant communications pathways so service can be restored quickly after severe weather. The Pacheco Pass segment falls within the broader Merced to San Jose section. which is in the advanced pre-construction phase. Full-scale construction is expected to begin in late 2026 or early 2027, following the completion of design, environmental permitting, and contractor procurement. In 2026, geotechnical investigations are being conducted at multiple points across the alignment, including test drilling to analyze subsurface conditions, fault mapping near the Calaveras and San Andreas fault zones, and seismic risk assessments required for final tunnel engineering. The tunnel alignment will require 2 main bores with an internal diameter of approximately 40 feet each, separated by cross passages every 1,000 to 1,500 feet to allow emergency access and pressure equalization. An intermediate access shaft is also planned in the vicinity of Casa de Fruta to provide tunnel boring machine launch capability and logistical support during construction. The geology of the Diablo Range presents significant challenges with faulted rock zones, variable water inflows, and compressible soils in valley transitions. Tunneling will be conducted using pressurized tunnel boring machines capable of navigating mixed face and high-pressure conditions. The Pacheco Pass tunnels will pass under critical infrastructure, protected habitat areas, and seismic fault lines, requiring advanced lining systems and continuous monitoring. Designs include seismic isolation joints and drainage galleries to mitigate fault displacement risk and groundwater intrusion. Tunnel depth will range from 100 to over 1,000 feet below surface, depending on terrain. Ventilation and safety systems, including emergency egress, fire protection, and pressurization controls, are part of the ongoing systems design effort in 2026. Upon completion, the tunnels will enable a seamless high-speed rail corridor from Merced to Gilroy, reducing rail travel time across the pass from over an hour to just under 15 minutes. Combined with viaducts, embankments, and cut and fill, sections across the San Joaquin Valley and into the Santa Clara Valley, the Pacheco Pass alignment represents one of the most capital-intensive and engineering-heavy components of the entire HSR system. The full Merced to San Jose segment is targeted for phased operational readiness beginning in the early 2030s, contingent on funding and right-of-way clearance. In 2026, contract packaging and procurement strategy are being finalized. The tunnel construction will likely be delivered as part of a design-build package, integrating civil structures, systems, and tunnel fit-out under a single delivery framework. Coordination with Caltrain and Union Pacific Railroad in the Gilroy area is also active in 2026, where blended operations with existing rail infrastructure are being planned. At full build-out, the Pacheco Pass tunnels will serve as the gateway between the Central Valley's agricultural and inland urban centers and the tech-driven economy of Northern California. The tunnels are expected to handle multiple high-speed rail trains per hour in each direction, forming a high-capacity backbone for statewide intercity travel. Their construction, once launched, will take an estimated 6 to 7 years, involving around-the-clock excavation and a continuous logistics chain to manage spoil removal, liner segment installation, and tunnel utility integration. Covering more than 27 acres across multiple downtown blocks, Miami World Center is not a single construction project, but a layered megaproject built through coordinated phases that collectively reshaped the northern edge of downtown Miami. Miami World Center is located north of the Central Business District, bounded generally by Northeast 2nd Avenue, Interstate 395, and Northeast 8th Street. The site consisted for decades of underutilized parcels, surface parking, and fragmented low-rise structures. Formal planning for redevelopment began in the early 2000s, with land assembly occurring gradually over many years. The scale of the site required a master-planned approach rather than a single build execution. Major construction activity began in the mid-2010s, following zoning approvals and infrastructure agreements with the City of Miami and Miami-Dade County. Early phases focused on horizontal construction, including demolition, mass grading, utility relocation, and the installation of new underground infrastructure. Water, sewer, power, communications, and stormwater systems were rebuilt to support millions of square feet of future development. A defining construction element of Miami World Center was its internal street grid. New public streets were carved through the site, requiring roadway construction, drainage systems, sidewalks, lighting, and streetscape elements. These streets were designed to function as permanent city infrastructure rather than private access roads, integrating the development into the surrounding urban fabric. Vertical construction followed in multiple, overlapping phases. Residential towers were among the first major structures to rise, each requiring deep foundations suited to Miami's limestone geology and high groundwater conditions. Pile foundations, reinforced concrete cores, and high-rise flat-plate floor systems were used across most towers, with construction sequenced to allow simultaneous builds on adjacent parcels. Retail and commercial structures were developed at the podium and street levels. These buildings required large-span structural systems to create flexible interior layouts for tenants. Mechanical and electrical systems were distributed through shared service corridors to reduce redundancy across the district. Loading docks and service access points were consolidated to minimize street-level disruption. One of the most significant infrastructure integrations within Miami World Center was its relationship with regional transit. The development was designed around proximity to Brightline's Miami Central Station, as well as Metrorail, Metro Mover, and bus connections. Pedestrian corridors and public spaces were constructed to funnel foot traffic between transit nodes and interior blocks, requiring careful grading and structural decking over below-grade utilities. Construction timelines varied by parcel. Early residential and retail components began delivering units around 2018 and 2019. Additional towers and commercial buildings were completed in the early 2020s, with construction continuing in phases as market conditions and financing allowed. Unlike a single mega project with a fixed end date, Miami World Center evolved through staggered completions. Hotel construction formed another major component. Large hospitality structures required distinct structural and mechanical systems, including back-of-house service cores, conference, spaces, and rooftop amenities. These buildings were constructed concurrently with residential towers, increasing logistical complexity across the site. Parking infrastructure was largely integrated into podiums and below-grade levels. This required excavation, dewatering, and reinforced slab construction beneath active building sites. Parking systems were designed to serve multiple uses, including residential, retail, and event traffic, reducing the need for standalone garages. From a construction management perspective, Miami World Center required coordination across dozens of contractors, architects, and engineers. Crane operations, concrete pours, and material deliveries were scheduled to avoid conflicts within a dense, active site. Safety planning was critical due to the proximity of Interstate 395 and ongoing city traffic. The megaproject also included public space construction, such as plazas and pedestrian promenades. These areas required structural support for landscaping, irrigation systems, and integrated lighting. Public realm construction often occurred late in each phase, following heavy structural work.
Where the Port of Los Angeles meets the open Pacific, a vast transformation is underway. Once a place defined by rusted cranes and abandoned warehouses, San Pedro's historic waterfront is being reimagined as a massive public destination. This is West Harbor, a $500 million redevelopment project that's reshaping 42 acres of prime harborfront land into one of the largest and most ambitious waterfront revitalizations in California history. For decades, the San Pedro waterfront was a place of industry. Cargo ships, rail lines, and container yards dominated the landscape, cutting the community off from its own shoreline. The ocean was always there, visible but unreachable. The idea behind West Harbor was radical in its simplicity. Take land that had long been the realm of cranes and commerce and return it to the people. Replace the shipping yards with open promenades. Tear down the fences, open the gates. But turning a gritty, industrial port into a modern, urban waterfront park isn't just a matter of cosmetics. It's an enormous engineering challenge. Beneath the surface, the ground itself needed rebuilding. Years of marine traffic, heavy equipment, and salt exposure had weakened bulkheads and corroded old pilings. Before a single restaurant could open, crews had to stabilize the soil, drive hundreds of deep foundation supports, and upgrade the harbor's edge to withstand both tidal surges and seismic shocks. At the heart of the project is a massive promenade that wraps along the water, designed not just for pedestrians, but for resilience. The concrete pathways are elevated to anticipate sea level rise, with drainage systems engineered to handle storm surges from both land and ocean. New docks are being constructed to support visiting ships and harbor cruises, each one designed with floating gangways that rise and fall with the tides, maintaining access even in extreme conditions. West Harbor isn't just infrastructure, it's experience. The development includes over 150,000 square feet of space for retail, dining, and entertainment, with anchor tenants ranging from artisan markets to major restaurants. A 6,200-seat outdoor amphitheater is being built directly on the waterfront, engineered to deliver concert-quality acoustics in a coastal environment, where sound bounces unpredictably off water and wind. Engineers had to design the stage foundation to accommodate both musical events and the occasional pounding from Pacific storms, using vibration damping, materials, and reinforced steel substructures. All of this, performance spaces, restaurants, shops, sits on land reclaimed from decades of industrial use. That meant a full environmental remediation process, involving soil testing, removal of contaminated fill, and installation of modern stormwater systems to prevent runoff from polluting the bay. A particularly complex element was integrating the new West Harbor seamlessly with the surrounding transportation network. This meant widening roads, building new intersections, and coordinating with nearby freight operations, all while preserving the historic landmarks that give San Pedro its identity. The historic battleship Iowa, docked nearby, had to be factored into every phase of design, ensuring visitor access remained open during construction. The engineering teams also had to work in parallel with the Port of LA's ongoing operations, scheduling pile driving and crane activity to avoid disrupting maritime logistics. Even as the heavy machinery rolls and concrete is poured, the bigger vision is already taking shape. This isn't just about leisure. It's about reconnecting a city with its coastline. For generations, San Pedro's waterfront was a wall of industry. West Harbor turns it into a front porch. Amid the swirling dust and sun-baked plains of northern Egypt, where the echoes of antiquity still hum beneath the surface, a different kind of monument began to rise in the 20th century. Not one, carved from stone, but cast in concrete and steel. Cairo International Airport was conceived as Egypt's primary portal to the modern world, a replacement for the aging Al Mazah Airport that could handle the soaring demands of commercial aviation in a capital rapidly expanding in population, influence, and ambition. From its inception, the project was steeped in logistical complexity, shaped by the challenges of working in a desert environment while tethered to the ambitions of a globalizing era. The early phases of construction focused on establishing the core infrastructure that would serve as the foundation for decades of layered growth. Located northeast of central Cairo, the site had to be fully excavated, graded, and serviced with basic utilities in an area that, at the time, lacked deep infrastructure. Massive swaths of earth were moved, and early work involved laying vast concrete aprons and taxiways capable of withstanding the punishing heat and seasonal extremes of the region. The soil conditions, arid and loosely compacted, required specialized engineering techniques to ensure long-term stability. Foundations were reinforced with deep footings and treated aggregate layers to mitigate shifting and cracking under the relentless Egyptian sun. Terminal construction began with a modular approach, an intentional strategy designed to facilitate future expansion without disrupting operations. Terminal 1, known in its early form as the Old Airport, was built with broad, open-plan halls supported by a reinforced concrete frame and long-span steel beams. The design prioritized resilience over aesthetics, focusing on airflow, structural simplicity, and load-bearing efficiency. Glass curtain walls and shading systems were introduced to reduce thermal gain while still allowing for natural light, crucial in a location where daytime temperatures often soared. As aviation volumes increased, the terminal underwent multiple expansion campaigns, each requiring retrofitting older structures with newer systems for baggage handling, ventilation, and fire safety, all while keeping the terminal partially operational. The addition of Terminals 2 and 3 marked a significant evolution in construction philosophy. Terminal 2, originally completed decades ago, eventually underwent a complete overhaul to bring it in line with international standards. This reconstruction was a feat of surgical engineering. The original frame was selectively demolished, and new sections were grafted into the existing structure. Contractors worked in tight, active zones, reinforcing aging concrete, integrating new seismic protections, and threading miles of electrical, plumbing, and HVAC lines through spaces never designed to hold them. Terminal 3, on the other hand, was a clean slate, constructed from the ground up as a state-of-the-art facility to accommodate wide-body aircraft and higher passenger volumes. Its frame was built from high-strength concrete and a steel roof truss system, supporting a terminal footprint that included dual-level departure and arrival flows, jet bridge systems, and a matrix of automated luggage belts built into a multi-tiered substructure. Beyond the terminals, Cairo's runways demanded careful engineering. Laid in parallel orientations to optimize wind handling and maximize simultaneous movements, the runways were constructed with high-durability concrete overlays and embedded lighting systems for all-weather operations. Groundwork involved excavation and subgrade stabilization across thousands of linear meters, requiring constant calibration to maintain level grading and load-bearing integrity. Runway expansions had to be synchronized with radar installations, air traffic control upgrades, and expanded taxiway systems to manage growing traffic without compromising safety or efficiency. Meanwhile, auxiliary construction, parking decks, maintenance hangars, fuel farms, and cargo facilities developed in parallel. Each support system required its own logistical plan, from fuel pipeline installations and fire suppression systems to cold storage zones for cargo handling. The cumulative effect was a sprawling, highly compartmentalized aviation complex whose every square meter had to be engineered for durability, redundancy, and heat resilience.
High above downtown Miami's core, the Waldorf Astoria Miami is being built in 2026 as a vertically stacked luxury tower where hotel operations and branded residences share one structural and mechanical system. The project's defining feature is its stacked cubes, massing And that geometry drives the construction approach because each offset volume changes load paths, facade transitions, and floor plate layouts. In 2026, the construction work is centered on 3 overlapping priorities: pushing the concrete superstructure upward, enclosing the building with curtain wall, and installing the systems that allow hotel and residential spaces to function as separate operational zones. The reinforced concrete core typically leads the schedule, climbing ahead of the floor slabs so elevator shafts, stairwells, and riser corridors stay on pace. Floor-by-floor cycles in 2026 focus on rebar placement, post-tensioning, slab pours, and edge form detailing at the cube offsets, where geometry changes demand tighter survey control and additional structural coordination. Facade installation is a second critical track in 2026. Curtain wall panels are set on the lower and mid levels to make completed floors weather-tight, allowing interior trades to work behind the facade while structure continues above. Miami's wind and rain exposure makes waterproofing and pressure equalization detailing a major part of 2026 work, especially at the stacked transitions where facade lines break and restart. Window wall interfaces, balcony edges, and podium connections receive additional sealing, drainage routing, and inspection cycles to reduce long-term water intrusion risk. Mechanical and electrical work expands rapidly during 2026 as more floors become accessible. Hotel levels require high-capacity ventilation, laundry, and kitchen exhaust pathways, and robust domestic hot water systems, while residential floors demand quieter distribution and separate metering strategies. That separation shows up in 2026 as distinct mechanical rooms, dedicated shafts, and controlled access service corridors being framed and roughed in. Fire protection piping, smoke control systems, and stair pressurization are installed early because they tie directly into life safety approvals and commissioning. Vertical transportation is another major 2026 focus. Elevator rails, machine room installations, and hoistway finishing are sequenced in zones so testing can begin in lower sections while upper floors are still under active construction. For a mixed-use luxury tower, elevator grouping and access control are built into the core planning, so 2026 includes substantial low-voltage work for security, destination dispatch systems, and building-wide communications backbones. Podium and public-facing components also progress in 2026. Lobby volumes, drop-off areas, and back-of-house logistics spaces are built to handle hotel peak loads without interfering with residential circulation. Premium amenities such as elevated decks and spa or pool infrastructure require heavy waterproofing assemblies, structural supports for concentrated loads, and early mechanical tie-ins for filtration and climate control. In 2026, several major extensions of the Bay Area Rapid Transit System are under construction, forming a critical part of Northern California's long-term transit infrastructure strategy. The largest and most technically complex is the Silicon Valley Phase 2 extension, a 6-mile expansion of BART. Service from Berryessa, North San Jose, to downtown San Jose and Santa Clara. This project is being led by the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority in partnership with BART, and is a federally funded, multi-billion-dollar endeavor. Construction in 2026 is fully active along the entire Phase 2 alignment. The project includes 4 new stations: 28th Street, Little Portugal, downtown San Jose, Diridon, and Santa Clara. Approximately 5 miles of the alignment will be constructed using a single-bore tunnel, 45 feet in diameter, making it one of the largest subway tunnel sections in North America. In 2026, tunneling operations are scheduled to begin following completion of launch shaft excavation and assembly of the tunnel boring machine. Shaft construction and staging zones are already established at multiple sites, including the western portal near Diridon Station. The downtown San Jose station, which will be built underground, presents specific challenges due to its depth and proximity to active utilities, heritage buildings, and seismic zones. In 2026, deep excavation, support of excavation walls, and early concrete pours are underway. Similar substructure work is progressing at 28th Street and Diridon, where retained cut and mined station boxes are being constructed. Cut and cover methods are being used at the Santa Clara station, which will serve as the new western terminus of the extension and will include a surface-level tail track and storage tracks. The entire Phase 2 extension is projected to open for revenue service by 2036, with major civil work and tunneling expected to conclude by the early 2030s. The project's integration with existing transit hubs, including Caltrain, Amtrak, VTA Light Rail, and future California High-Speed Rail at Diridon, is a key element of the design. In 2026, intermodal design coordination is ongoing between BART, VTA, Caltrain, and city agencies to synchronize platforms, vertical circulation, and fare systems. Elsewhere in the Bay Area, BART is continuing with other network improvement projects in 2026. This includes planning and pre-construction for the potential extension to Livermore along the I-580 corridor. Although not yet in full construction, right-of-way acquisition and environmental reviews are active. This corridor is intended to close a critical gap between Dublin, Pleasanton, and the Tri-Valley region. Throughout Central and Southern California in 2026, university campuses are undergoing large-scale construction to accommodate rising enrollment, research expansion, and updated sustainability mandates. These developments span multiple University of California and California State University institutions, with a focus on housing, laboratories, medical infrastructure, and renewable energy integration. At the University of California, Merced, construction continues on multiple academic and housing facilities under the 2020 Project Phase 2, expanding the campus's capacity well beyond its original footprint. In 2026, vertical construction is active on new science and engineering buildings, along with residential halls that will add over 1,000 new beds by 2027. These additions support UC Merced's long-term goal to serve over 15,000 students and enhance its research output in agricultural technology and climate science. Rather than rising from untouched land, the new Miami-Dade Airport emerged through one of the largest continuous airport reconstruction programs ever undertaken in the United States, transforming Miami International Airport into what is effectively a rebuilt megastructure operating in real time. Miami International Airport sits west of downtown Miami and functions as the primary global aviation gateway for South Florida and Latin America. By the late 1990s, the airport's original mid-20th century terminals, roadways, and airfield systems were no longer capable of handling projected passenger growth, new aircraft sizes, or modern security requirements. Miami-Dade County responded by launching a long-term capital improvement effort, commonly referred to as the airport's New Airport Program, a reconstruction on the scale of a greenfield build while maintaining daily operations. The centerpiece of this transformation was the North Terminal Development Program, a multi-billion-dollar mega project that replaced large portions of the airport's aging infrastructure. Planning began in the late 1990s, with construction starting in the early 2000s. The program consolidated multiple older concourses into a single, linear terminal complex designed to improve passenger flow, security processing, and aircraft operations. Construction involved complete demolition of outdated concourses, utility corridors, and support buildings, followed by new foundations, structural frames, and terminal shells built adjacent to active runways and taxiways. This required phased construction sequencing to keep aircraft movements uninterrupted. New terminal structures were built using long-span steel and reinforced concrete systems capable of supporting large wide-body aircraft gates and high passenger volumes. The North Terminal was developed in multiple phases. Early phases focused on airside infrastructure, including new taxi lanes, aircraft parking aprons, and fuel hydrant systems. Subsequent phases delivered passenger processing spaces, including ticketing halls, security checkpoints, baggage handling systems, and customs facilities. The first major sections opened to passengers in the mid-2000s, with full substantial completion achieved in the early 2010s. A critical component of the new airport construction was the installation of an automated people mover system connecting the terminal to remote rental car facilities and parking structures. This required elevated guideways, stations integrated into terminal buildings, and control systems installed above active roadways. The people mover significantly reconfigured landside access to the airport. The reconstruction extended beyond terminals. Miami-Dade County invested heavily in runway rehabilitation and expansion, including pavement reconstruction, lighting upgrades, and drainage improvements. Taxiway geometry was modified to accommodate larger aircraft, such as the Airbus A380 and Boeing 777. These airfield works were completed incrementally over many years, often overnight, to avoid disrupting flight schedules. Cargo infrastructure was also rebuilt as part of the airport's Megaproject evolution. New cargo buildings, cold storage facilities, and access roads were constructed to support Miami's role as a major freight hub for perishable goods. These upgrades aligned with parallel megaprojects at Port Miami, reinforcing the county's logistics network. Security and resilience upgrades formed another major construction layer. Post-9/11 requirements led to reinforced terminal layouts, expanded security screening zones, and hardened building systems. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems were replaced or upgraded to modern standards, including redundant power supplies and advanced fire protection. Flood mitigation and drainage improvements were incorporated to address Miami's climate and storm exposure. The timeline of the new Miami-Dade Airport build spans more than a decade. Major construction activity peaked between roughly 2004 and 2012, with continuous smaller projects extending beyond that period. By the early 2010s, the airport had effectively transitioned from a mid-century facility into a modern aviation megastructure, capable of handling tens of millions of passengers annually. Within the broader context of Miami's biggest megaprojects, the airport reconstruction stands alongside developments such as the Port of Miami Tunnel, Brickell City Center, and large-scale transit investments. Unlike vertical megaprojects, the airport rebuild was horizontal and systemic, requiring coordination across aviation operations, federal agencies, contractors, and airlines.
Brightline West isn't an idea. It's under construction. A $12 billion high-speed rail megaproject designed to link Los Angeles to Las Vegas in just over 2 hours, cutting a trip that often takes over 5 by car. With speeds reaching 200 miles per hour and over 260 miles of new rail corridor, this is one of the largest and most complex infrastructure projects ever attempted in the American Southwest. The alignment runs primarily along the I-15 corridor, chosen for its straight path, existing right-of-way, and the massive volume of traffic it sees. Over 50 million people travel between LA and Las Vegas each year, many of them stuck in stop-and-go congestion. Building next to a major interstate, however, comes with logistical and engineering demands on a different scale. Crews must work within narrow margins between freeway traffic and construction zones, requiring extensive concrete barriers, temporary detours, and phased sequencing to avoid bottlenecks. The trains will operate entirely on dedicated, grade-separated track. That means no level crossings, no signal delays, and no sharing with freight or commuter rail, making Brightline West a true high-speed rail system by global standards. To achieve this, over 300 structures are being constructed along the route, including overpasses, bridges, wildlife crossings, and viaducts. Every one of them is engineered to withstand extreme desert heat, high wind speeds, and seismic loads consistent with California building codes. One of the most technically demanding sections involves crossing the Kaijan Pass, an elevation climb of over 3,000 feet between the inland empire and the high desert. This stretch requires extensive cut-and-fill operations, retaining walls and reinforced embankments. Specialized track design, including banked curves and controlled gradients, ensures that trains maintain high speeds without overstressing the vehicles or the infrastructure. Trackbed construction is another layer of complexity. Unlike conventional rail, high-speed systems require exacting tolerances for smoothness and alignment. The subgrade must be compacted and stabilized to millimeter-level accuracy, followed by multiple layers of ballast, reinforced concrete slab track, and vibration-damping materials. These systems are monitored in real time through embedded sensors, allowing for predictive maintenance and immediate response to deviations. Powering the system is an electrified catenary line running the full length of the corridor. This requires constructing hundreds of miles of new transmission infrastructure, including substations, overhead gantries, and high-voltage feeds. To ensure uninterrupted service, the power supply is designed with built-in redundancy and real-time switching capabilities. Utility coordination across 2 states and multiple counties adds further layers of complexity to every mile built. The train sets themselves, based on Siemens Velaro or similar European high-speed rail platforms, will be custom-modified for American standards. Each unit will feature aerodynamic nose cones, regenerative braking systems, crash energy management structures, and lightweight aluminum bodies to reduce axle load and track wear. These aren't commuter trains. They're precision-built machines designed to run at 200 mph across open terrain, with acceleration, deceleration, and safety systems modeled after Japan's Shinkansen and Germany's ICE. They didn't just build an airport on the shores of the Black Sea. They carved a new future for a nation out of rock, sea, and ambition. The construction of Istanbul Airport, one of the most audacious infrastructure projects of the 21st century, was not just a matter of civil engineering. It was a national statement, a vision chiseled into existence with relentless speed and almost cinematic scale. From the very first shovel of Earth, this project wasn't designed to follow global aviation standards. It was meant to redefine them. The site itself was a challenge from the start. A mix of former open-pit coal mines, wetlands, and unstable terrain that required millions of cubic meters of earth to be moved, compacted, and stabilized. This wasn't just land reclamation. It was land transformation on a continental scale. Thousands of workers labored around the clock, building not only runways and terminals, but the very ground those structures would stand on. The scale of the terminal alone is staggering. Designed to be the largest under a single roof anywhere on Earth, the main passenger terminal covers over 1 million square meters. Its skeleton is steel, its skin glass and aluminum, but its foundation is poured from unflinching confidence. Every beam, every column was part of a choreography measured in millimeters, but executed at megastructure scale. Construction teams sourced materials from all over Turkey and beyond, fueling a logistical operation that mirrored military precision. Concrete was poured by the ton, and cranes moved like clock hands over the site, some of them among the tallest and most powerful in the world. And at the heart of it all, the project had to maintain momentum in a political and economic climate that was, at times, deeply volatile. Timing was everything. The goal was clear from the start. Open fast, open big. Unlike projects that slowly build up capacity, Istanbul Airport was envisioned to make a splash from day one. That meant building not one, but multiple parallel runways right from the outset, designed to handle hundreds of flights a day with minimal delay. The air traffic control tower, with its sleek, tulip-inspired silhouette, was one of the first structures to rise, signaling the pace and design sophistication the rest of the site would follow. Around it, a spiderweb of service roads, utility tunnels, fuel lines, and drainage systems had to be laid out with unerring accuracy. Every inch of the infrastructure was future-proofed to accommodate the long-term goal: over 200 million passengers annually once all phases are complete. No corner of this site was spared from overachievement. The cargo facilities were built to rival dedicated freight airports, with massive warehouses and high-speed loading systems constructed at breakneck pace. The runway system, built across 4 phases, was designed not only for volume but for wind, direction optimization, weather resilience, and operational efficiency that could outpace even the world's most established airports. Drainage was a particular challenge, given the area's geography. Massive culverts and underground reservoirs were constructed to manage rainwater and prevent flooding, a vital concern in a place where the sea is never far and the weather can turn swiftly. Even power and data lines were installed with redundancy and scalability in mind, buried deep and routed through protected channels to safeguard against both overload and sabotage. When construction crews finally handed over the keys, what they left behind wasn't just an airport. It was a piece of infrastructure that looked less like a public utility and more like a declaration carved into the earth. The sheer act of building it, under such tight deadlines, across such difficult terrain, and on such a colossal scale, stands as one of the great modern feats of engineering. It's not just what was built, it's how it was done. Quickly, relentlessly, and without blinking in the face of impossible complexity.
Just north of Miami's urban core, the Modera Aventura South development is, in 2026, an active mid to high-rise residential construction project shaped by tight site logistics, flood resilience requirements, and the demand for transit-adjacent housing near one of the region's busiest retail and employment centers. In the Miami area megaproject context for 2026, its scale comes from the combination of vertical density, structured parking, and the infrastructure needed to deliver a modern multifamily building in a coastal environment. Construction in 2026 is typically focused on moving the building from structural completion into enclosure and interior delivery. The reinforced concrete frame and central core drive the schedule, with crews completing floor plate pours, stair and elevator cores, and post-tensioning sequences that keep the structure advancing on a predictable cycle. As floors are completed, the facade package follows, with window wall and balcony systems installed to create weather-tight zones that allow interior trades to start work without waiting for the whole tower to top out. Because South Florida construction is defined by rain and humidity, 2026 work includes aggressive waterproofing and moisture management detailing. That shows up in balcony edge treatments, slab penetrations, window interfaces, and podium transitions, where leaks often originate if detailing is rushed. Roofing systems and parapet work also begin earlier than in drier climates, because creating protected interior zones accelerates the overall schedule. Mechanical and electrical work expands rapidly in 2026 as enclosed levels become available. Contractors install vertical risers, corridor duct mains, and fan coil or VRF distribution, depending on the design. Fire protection piping, alarm devices, and stair pressurization systems are installed early because they tie directly to life safety inspections. Electrical distribution grows floor by floor with panel boards, metering, and backup provisions for critical systems like fire pumps and emergency lighting. Podium and parking structure work is a major component in 2026, Many Aventura area multifamily projects use structured parking to reduce land consumption, so construction includes ramp slabs, ventilation, and fire separation between parking and residential floors. Access control systems, entry gates, and camera infrastructure are typically embedded at this stage, along with the conduit network for EV charging capacity, which is increasingly standards. In new developments, interior build-out becomes the dominant activity by mid to late 2026. Crews move through framing, insulation, drywall, and finish trades in a production sequence that prioritizes lower floors first. Unit kitchens and bathrooms drive scheduling because they require coordinated plumbing, rough-ins, waterproofed wet walls, and inspection-ready assemblies before tile and fixtures can proceed. Common areas and amenity spaces are also being built out in 2026, including fitness rooms, co-working areas, and resident lounges that require more complex electrical and HVAC zoning than typical corridors. Site and streetscape work continues in parallel. In 2026, contractors finalize sidewalks, landscaping, and stormwater systems, including on-site retention and controlled discharge required for heavy rain events. Driveway tie-ins, rideshare drop-off geometry, and service access routes are completed with a focus on separating resident traffic from deliveries and waste handling. In 2026, one of California's most vital water infrastructure projects is under full-scale construction in the western Sacramento Valley. The site's reservoir project, located northwest of Sacramento near the community of Maxwell in Colusa County, is a planned off-stream reservoir with a total capacity of up to 1.5 million acre-feet. Unlike traditional on-stream reservoirs, sites will store water diverted from the Sacramento River during high-flow periods, reducing flood risk while creating a critical reserve for drought resilience. The project entered its primary construction phase in 2026, following final approvals, funding commitments, and site preparation work completed in preceding years. Grading, excavation, and embankment work are active across multiple fronts, including the main site's dam and Golden Gate Dam, both of which will form the eastern and western boundaries of the reservoir basin. These earthen embankment dams will rise approximately 310 feet above the valley floor and span over 4,000 feet in length, designed to safely contain the seasonal floodwaters diverted via a complex network of conveyance infrastructure. Construction of the associated intake facilities on the Sacramento River near the existing Red Bluff and Colusa Basin regions is also progressing in 2026. These facilities will include fish screens, pumping stations, and underground pipelines designed to divert excess winter and spring flows into the reservoir while maintaining compliance with environmental flow standards. Twin conveyance pipelines, approximately 14 miles long, are being installed to transport the diverted water westward to the reservoir basin. At the same time, work is advancing on the terminal regulating reservoir, located near Dunnigan, which will play a role in distributing stored water to the existing Central Valley Project and State Water Project networks. This integration allows site's reservoir to serve multiple uses: agricultural irrigation, urban supply, wildlife refuges, and ecosystem support, particularly in dry years when water deliveries are traditionally curtailed. The reservoir's location was selected in part due to its off-stream design, which minimizes disruption to fish migration and river ecology while allowing water storage flexibility. In 2026, foundation treatment, compaction, and embankment fill placement are underway, utilizing local materials sourced from adjacent borrow sites. The volume of material movement is extensive, with millions of cubic yards being relocated and compacted to form the primary dam structures. Concrete structures, including control towers, outlet works, and spillways, are also in early stages of placement. The site's project authority, which oversees the project, expects major civil works to continue through at least 2029. By then, reservoir impoundment and system testing will begin. Full operational readiness is projected for the early 2030s, although water deliveries could begin earlier depending on hydrological conditions and infrastructure completion rates. The construction effort in 2026 employs hundreds of workers and involves coordination with federal, state, and regional water agencies. Rising from the western edge of downtown Miami, Panorama Tower represents one of the most consequential vertical construction efforts in the city's modern history and stands as a defining chapter in Miami's era of megaproject development. Panorama Tower is an 85-story, mixed-use skyscraper located at 1101 Brickell Avenue, positioned at the intersection of Brickell Downtown and the Miami Health District. When it topped out, it became the tallest building in Florida, reaching a structural height of approximately 868 feet. Construction began in 2013, and the tower was officially completed in 2018, following a multi-year development cycle that coincided with Miami's rapid transformation into a global, high-rise city. The project was developed by Florida East Coast Realty, a company with deep historical ties to the state's infrastructure and urban development. Panorama Tower was conceived not as a single-purpose building, but as a vertically integrated megastructure combining residential, office, hotel, and retail space within one footprint. This approach reflected a broader shift in Miami construction during the 2010s, where land constraints and economic growth pushed developers toward dense, mixed-use, vertical solutions. The construction scope of Panorama Tower was extensive and technically demanding. The tower contains more than 2.8 million square feet of total built area. Its program includes approximately 821 residential units, over 200,000 square feet of Class A office space, a 208-room hotel, and significant ground-level retail and parking infrastructure. The building's foundation required deep piling systems designed to anchor the structure into Miami's limestone bedrock, a critical engineering challenge given the city's high water table and coastal soil conditions. Structurally, Panorama Tower uses a reinforced concrete core and shear wall system, a method commonly employed in super tall residential towers, but executed here at unprecedented scale for Florida. High-strength concrete mixers were required to handle vertical loads at extreme heights, and the construction sequence demanded precise coordination to maintain schedule while pouring floor plates at increasing elevations. Wind engineering played a central role in the design, with the tower engineered to withstand hurricane force wind loads common to South Florida. Construction logistics were particularly complex due to the site's proximity to major roadways and active urban districts. Crane operations, concrete deliveries, and vertical material transport had to be tightly managed to minimize disruption to surrounding neighborhoods. At peak construction, hundreds of workers were on site daily, contributing to one of the largest active construction projects in Miami at the time. The timeline of Panorama Tower closely mirrors Miami's broader construction boom. Groundwork and foundation activities began shortly after the 2013 groundbreaking. Vertical construction accelerated between 2015 and 2017, during which the tower surpassed all other buildings in the state in height. Topping out occurred in late 2017, marking a symbolic milestone for Miami's skyline. Interior build-out, systems commissioning, and phased occupancy continued into 2018, when the project reached full completion. Within the context of Miami's megaproject landscape, Panorama Tower stands alongside developments such as Brickell City Center, Miami World Center, and the ongoing expansion of the downtown and Brickell corridors. Unlike large multi-block projects, Panorama Tower condensed megaproject scale into a single vertical structure, demonstrating how Miami's growth could be achieved upward rather than outward. The building also marked a shift in how Miami approached mixed-use density. By stacking residential, hospitality, and commercial uses, Panorama Tower reduced reliance on horizontal sprawl and car-dependent layouts. Its parking systems, mechanical floors, and vertical circulation were engineered to support thousands of daily occupants within a single building envelope.
Not every airport begins with a blank slate. Some rise out of the chaos of overburdened infrastructure, and others, like Shanghai Pudong International, are built with foresight, planned from the ground up to handle a future that had not yet arrived. In the 1990s, Shanghai's existing airport, Hongqiao, was bursting at the seams, hemmed in by the city's explosive growth. The answer wasn't to expand within, it was to build outward, toward the coast. What followed was a high-speed campaign to reclaim land from the East China Sea and erect one of the most strategically engineered air hubs in Asia. Construction began not on solid land, but on soft, low-lying tidal flats. These coastal mudlands presented a serious engineering challenge. To establish a stable foundation, workers undertook an enormous land reclamation effort. Millions of cubic meters of sand and earth were dredged, compacted, and layered to form a platform strong enough to carry the weight of runways, terminals, and supporting structures. To prevent long-term subsidence, a real threat in such terrain, engineers employed deep piling techniques and advanced geotextile stabilization systems. It wasn't just about laying the groundwork. It was about making sure that groundwork could last for decades under the pressure of non-stop air traffic. Once the land was stabilized, Pudong's first phase was fast-tracked into reality. The master plan was modular and scalable, with future expansion built into the DNA of the project. Terminal 1, with its long, linear design, was constructed to handle the rising wave of international traffic, linking China's financial hub with the global economy. The roof structure, supported by a forest of sleek steel columns, was engineered for both visual lightness and structural strength, while large spans of glass maximized daylight without sacrificing thermal performance. Inside the terminal's shell, kilometers of electrical, plumbing, fire protection, and air handling systems had to be embedded with flawless precision. Every conduit and junction coordinated across dozens of contractors and engineering teams working simultaneously. The initial runway system was laid with equal attention to durability and volume. High-performance concrete was poured in long, uninterrupted sessions to create seamless surfaces for large-bodied aircraft. Drainage systems had to be designed not only for heavy rainfall, common in the region, but also for the complex water table beneath the reclaimed land. Pump stations, culverts, and storm channels were embedded into the very bones of the airport to ensure operations could continue during typhoons or seasonal flooding. Every phase was built with layers of redundancy, reflecting an understanding that resilience wasn't optional, it was foundational. As Shanghai's international profile soared, so did the scale of Pudong's ambitions. Terminal 2 was added in a massive expansion that more than doubled capacity, echoing the architectural language of the first terminal while integrating newer materials and systems. This phase included another runway, part of a broader plan to maintain aircraft flow without bottlenecks, and an underground transit network linking terminals and remote facilities. Construction crews worked in tandem with aviation authorities to ensure that all additions complied with evolving international standards, from runway safety zones to advanced baggage screening systems. The most striking construction achievement in later phases was the satellite concourse system. Gigantic structures linked by underground automated people movers. These satellite buildings weren't just appended. They were engineered to function as high-capacity extensions of the terminals, with full customs, immigration, and boarding infrastructure integrated underground and vertically. Building these while the airport remained fully operational required phased rollouts, nighttime shifts, and relentless coordination to avoid disrupting flight schedules.
The Los Angeles Metro D Line Extension, formerly known as the Purple Line Extension, is a $9.3 billion megaproject that is carving through some of the busiest, most congested corridors in California. This 9-mile westward expansion of heavy rail is unfolding in 3 carefully staged phases, each one bringing new connectivity to the city's west side. Construction began in 2014, and as of 2026, 2 of the 3 segments are deep in advanced construction, while the third is fully underway. The first section, stretching 3.92 miles from Wilshire Weston to Wilshire La Cienega, was scheduled for completion in 2025. Tunneling for this segment was completed in 2021, with station construction and systems installation now in final phases. Crews are outfitting stations with electrical, ventilation, and communication systems, while surface-level integration work continues at key intersections. The second segment, running from Wilshire, La Cienega to Century City, adds another 2.59 miles of dual-bore tunnel. This phase includes the construction of 2 stations, Wilshire, Rodeo in Beverly Hills, and Century City, Constellation. By 2026, excavation is complete and station interiors are progressing, with structural, mechanical, and architectural elements being finalized. This portion of the line is projected to be operational in 2026. The final segment, extending 2.56 miles to the VA hospital in Westwood, is scheduled for completion in 2027. Tunneling began in 2021, with both tunnel boring machines reaching the Westwood UCLA station box by mid-2024. By 2026, structural work at both Westwood stations is active, including excavation, waterproofing, and concrete shell construction. This third phase is particularly complex, not only due to proximity to critical federal and medical infrastructure, but also because of seismic design considerations near the Santa Monica Fault. All 3 phases are being constructed simultaneously to streamline delivery, maximize cost efficiency, and align operational readiness. Together, they form a continuous underground transit spine linking downtown Los Angeles to Beverly Hills, Century City, and Westwood, some of the region's highest density employment and residential zones. When complete, the D-Line extension will connect riders to major institutions, including UCLA, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and a cluster of Fortune 500 offices in Century City. By the time the full extension opens in 2027, the D-Line will operate across 13 miles from Union Station to the VA hospital in Westwood, serving nearly 80,000 weekday riders. This will dramatically reduce commute times along the corridor, potentially cutting rush hour trips from over an hour by car to under 30 minutes by rail. In addition to relieving pressure on the 10 and 405 freeways, the D-Line will improve access to key transit interchanges, including connections with the B-Line, E-Line, and multiple local and express bus routes. In 2026, deep excavation work is underway in the heart of California's rugged Diablo Range. At the core of this activity lies the Pacheco Pass tunnels, 2 parallel bores that will become the most technically demanding segment of the state's high-speed rail system. Spanning approximately 13.5 miles between the Central Valley and the Santa Clara Valley, this tunnel system is being designed to support trains traveling at speeds up to 220 miles per hour. Once complete, it will form the primary mountain crossing linking the Silicon Valley to the rest of the California high-speed rail network. South of downtown Fort Lauderdale and tightly linked to Miami's broader freight and cruise economy, Port Everglades is in 2026 in the middle of a multi-year expansion and modernization program that reads more like industrial infrastructure than a single project. The work is aimed at increasing container throughput, improving berth productivity, and strengthening landside access so cargo can move faster between ships, warehouses, and South Florida's highway network. In 2026, the most consequential construction is on the waterfront edge. Berth expansion and wharf strengthening work is underway to handle larger vessels and higher crane loads, which means crews are driving piles, placing sheet piles, and rebuilding the wharf face in sections to keep existing berths operating. Dredging and channel work, where scheduled, continues as a marine construction package with turbidity controls, sediment handling, and staged dredge windows to limit impacts while maintaining navigational reliability. Terminal yard modernization is a second major 2026 focus. Container yards are being reconfigured with heavier pavement sections, improved drainage, and new utility corridors so the port can support modern rubber-tired gantries, automated gate systems, and high-density stacking patterns. Lighting upgrades are being installed across active yards, typically shifting to high-output LED systems that improve visibility for night operations while reducing maintenance downtime. Gate and security improvements are also active in 2026 because landside flow is often the true bottleneck. Construction includes added gate lanes, redesigned queuing areas, and expanded inspection zones that separate empty container moves from full container moves. Intelligent transportation systems are being embedded into the roadway network, including license plate recognition, appointment-based truck processing infrastructure, and upgraded CCTV and access control systems tied into port security standards. Rail and roadway connectivity work continues in 2026 as part of the modernization strategy. On-dock or near-dock rail improvements, when included, require track rehabilitation, new switches, and improved staging areas, so longer trains can be assembled without blocking internal circulation. Roadway projects inside and around the port focus on turning radii, pavement strengthening for heavy axle loads, and intersection upgrades that reduce conflict points between trucks and passenger traffic in cruise-adjacent zones. Utility and resilience upgrades are a constant thread in 2026 construction. Ports depend on electrical reliability, fuel systems, and storm readiness. So projects commonly include substation improvements, upgraded shore power provisions where planned, and hardened communications networks. Stormwater systems are being expanded and cleaned up with new outfalls, pump capacity, and treatment features designed for intense rain events and sea level driven backflow risk. Timeline-wise, Port Everglades modernization is typically delivered as overlapping packages rather than a single completion date. In practical terms, 2026 is a mid-program year where berth works, yard reconstruction, and gate modernization are all active simultaneously, with individual components turning over to operations as soon as they pass. Testing and safety inspections. Full program completion is generally positioned in the late 2000s, with some elements extending beyond that depending on permitting, funding tranches, and how quickly the port can take facilities out of service for reconstruction.